against injustice. We chart our course. For women and girls of limitless worth, their rights to uphold their values on earth.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm hoping you can see me and hear me clearly. For those who are joining us, you are welcome to Brave Voices 2024. We'll give ourselves 2 minutes just for people to settle in, and then we'll commence properly. So you're all welcome. I can see you, I can sight you, I can visualize you from where I am. So again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are joining us. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Thank you. All right, welcome everyone. I'm back. So I just quickly went to the chat to do a little introduction. Welcome to Brave Voices, and we're kicking off now. My name is Ambassador Ndifreke Andrew Essien, and you can call me Frecky. If I'm going to sign my name, I can. So if I'm signing my name, it is Freky. That's Frecky. And my sign language name is Princess Freki. Zisash across. Yes, so it's a pleasure to be your host for this year's Brave Voices. I just want to know if I have people with me. So I see Paul. Paul, hi. Paul is reaching us from Philadelphia, and it's a pleasure to have him here. So if you're in the inbox, if you're here, just go to the inbox quickly and just drop your introductions, and I will continue to speak from here. So please go ahead and just drop who you are. I see someone from Namibia, that's Simalumba Nawa. Just keep dropping your introductions in the chat and we'll continue to read them out as we receive them. So welcome everyone. I don't know where Rachel went to, so I want to quickly start. Again, welcome to Brave Voices 2024. This is an annual conference, international conference by Kachem Young Initiative. For those who have been joining Brave Voices for the past years, you will know that this program is in commemoration of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And we have very robust conversations, different aspects of GBV and how we can eliminate it in our community. And today we have no exception. We're going to be having great conversations for the next few hours. So please sit down and join us on this incredible ride. So before we start the program proper, it's important for me to set some ground rules. Because we're using the virtual space, it's essential that we are together in this journey. So one of the first set of ground rules would be this. For those who are familiar with Zoom, you are familiar with the mute button. It's this little microphone at the bottom of your screen. Anytime that button doesn't have a line across it, it means that you are unmuted and we can hear you. So at any point where you are not speaking, please mute. The second thing we would like you to do is, if you're participating in this conference, as much as you can, as much as your bandwidth will allow you, you can allow your videos on. If not, you're okay to not allow your videos on, reason being that we understand the issues around bandwidth, especially for us in this side of the country. However, for our speakers, we would prefer that we can see as well as hear you. At any point in time, you find that you do not want your video to be on and you are not sure, the video icon is at the bottom of your screen. Across the icon indicates that your video is switched off. This is because we do not want persons who do not want things in their area to show, not to show. The third ground rule would be that we have, for accessibility, a sign language interpreter. She's currently pinned on the screen, and her screen name is Rachel Chidebere, Sign Language Interpreter. So if you're not sure of who the SLI is and you need the accessibility feature, please look for Rachel Chidebere, Sign Language Interpreter. That is the name on the screen. Pin it, and you will have that accessibility feature big on your screen. The fourth ground rule that I would like to set is actually simple, and it has to do with closed captioning. If you have a need for closed captions, you can activate that button also on your Zoom device, and closed captions will be made available to you. That feature has been activated for you. This program is going to be as interactive as possible, and that's why we said, please go ahead and introduce yourself from wherever you're reaching us. At any time, we'll be using the chat window a lot. So we've seen Ngozi from Nigeria, you're welcome. We've seen Seth from Moobs, you're welcome. We've seen Zuko from South Africa, Kemi from France. We also have a lot of people. We have Ali from Uganda. We have Tom from the US and others. So keep dropping your names and keep introducing yourself. You're all welcome to this Brave Voices 2024. We're going to go into the program almost immediately, but I just want to make sure that everyone is settled in Again, if we have need for questions and contributions in the course of the conversation, what's going to simply happen is that when whoever is anchoring that session calls, you would use the hand raising icon to raise your hand, and you will be called upon and unmuted by the tech team. If there is no need for that, then you can continue to drop your conversations, your observations, your contributions in the chat window. Our repertoires will capture every competition, every contribution you make in the course of the conversations. So if a topic strikes you and you have a contribution to make at any point, you can drop that contribution or question in the chat window. So welcome again to Brave Voices International Conference 2024. And we're so glad that this has been sustained. We're so glad to KYI for continuing to do this. And it's a pleasure to see everyone here today in this particular event. So Brave Voices will be having, in no short time, the welcome address. And the welcome address for this conference, of course, is going to be given by the convener of the conference, Nkechinyere Melva Uguru. She's going to be delivering the welcome address, because who better than the visionary of the, of a vision to tell us and welcome us into their space. So by way of introduction, if you would allow me, I would like to properly, if I can get it, introduce Melva, and then she's going to go ahead and give us the welcome address. So in the short, I'll read her profile and we'll get on with it. So Melva Nkechinyere Uguru is a legal practitioner with experience and expertise in disability and women's rights advocacy, gender-based violence activism, sustainable and inclusive development, and project design and management. Melva's passion birthed the founding of Kachem Young Initiative in 2017 to address inequalities in education, continuous inclusive education in crisis-prone communities, disability inclusion advocacy, community development, and gender-based violence activism for women and girls, inclusive of persons with disabilities. Her passion birthed Brave Voices, and one of her many initiatives for driving positive and inclusive change. So to bring us the welcome address, please, with an SLI clap or an emoji clap or a sounding clap, let's make welcome Nkechinyere Melva Uguru to give us shortly the welcome address in the next 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Frankie, for that introduction. Thank you everyone for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon. Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
Yes, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. It is my absolute honor to welcome you all to the Brave Voices International Conference for 2024, the fourth year in a row. Today, we gather not only as advocates and change makers, but as humans, united with one voice, with a shared commitment to end the injustice of gender-based violence, particularly against women and girls with disabilities because of their vulnerabilities. Let me start by sharing a story, one that I had shared on LinkedIn, I think about yesterday. Her name was Chinonso, a young girl full of potential, silenced by a world that failed her. She fled abuse only to face more of it. And when she cried out for help, no one listened. They thought she was mad. When she collapsed from exhaustion by the market side, society dismissed her as insane, of course. The truth, she was a victim of systemic neglect and a glaring absence of inclusive advocacy. Chinonso's story is tragic, but it is not unique anyway. see that every day, countless women and girls, especially those vulnerable, those with disabilities, face violence, neglect, barriers to justice. And this is why we are here. Brave Voices International is more than just a conference. It is a rallying cry to action, a space where we confront these injustices head on. This year, under the theme Unite, Invest to Prevent Violence Against Women and Girls with Disabilities, let us bridge inclusion gaps in advocacy. We call us all to, one, eliminate dependence and vulnerability by empowering women and girls with skills and resources. Bridge the gaps in advocacy through inclusive grassroots awareness and tailored interventions in all of our various endeavors. Prioritize mental wellness and recovery. It's very important as a fundamental part of justice. Focus on prevention to stop these cycles of violence before they even begin. Catch Em Young Initiative, which I lead, shares these values deeply. At KYI, we work to foster inclusive education, economic empowerment, and mental health support for vulnerable women and girls, with an unwavering focus on disability inclusion. Together we can help vulnerable women and girls. We can prevent, advocate, and ensure inclusion, and that they are not just goals, but also they are necessities, very key necessity to ensuring an inclusive world. Over the next few hours, you will hear from extraordinary speakers, some of whom we can see, including survivors themselves, field activists, policy experts, and advocates, all sharing tools, strategies, and stories to challenge the status quo, to humanize persons, women and girls with disability who have been victims of gender-based violence. Through this special address, panel discussions, and interactive sessions, we will deepen our understanding on gender-based violence and explore practical ways to achieve justice and inclusion in advocacy. But this is more than a mere conversation. This is a call to action. Chinonso's story, as I've told, reminds us why we cannot afford to be complacent. It challenges us to build a world where being vulnerable, whether because of gender, disability, or even your circumstance, does not mean being invisible or expendable. Let us use this platform, our platforms, to reimagine a society where justice includes recovery, where advocacy is inclusive, and where prevention saves lives. Thank you so much. And today, like I had earlier mentioned, I challenge us to listen closely, engage actively, and most importantly, commit boldly to being part of the solution, being part of solving the numerous challenge of exclusion in advocacy as we work together to ensure that no girl, no woman, and no person ever suffers in silence. Welcome again to Brave Voices International Conference 2024. Thank you very much. Over to you, Freki.
Yes. So I need our convener. Please do a lot of heart, Ida, as icons. Thank you so much for that amazing welcome address. It was beautiful. It set the tone, and we are grateful, Melva, for that. So we're going to be doing a lot in the next few hours. Like she writes, we are here today because there is a call. The International Day that spans across 6 days that commemorates elimination of violence against women, with persons with disabilities, especially for our community. The theme is Unite, Invest to Prevent Violence Against Women with Disabilities. Women, I keep saying women with disabilities because I identify as a woman with disability. But one of the key things that I would like to say is this: just relax and get ready to learn and unlearn, because we need to come together to continue to work. In Brave Voices for 2024, everything that is going to be done is, of course, focused on that. And one of the key vehicles that is used is what we call brave stories. Brave stories. So brave stories is an aspect of conference that focuses on actually helping us to begin to learn the excess of females with disabilities, advocates who are in the disability community. So it gives a human face, storytelling. And the next person that we're going to be listening, and I'm going to really ask the technical group to please cast per time. So help me be active enough to pin always either the speaker that it's speaking or the sign language interpreter and per time, so that we can always have that person's screen as the main screen for us. So I'll ask for that. So storytelling is one of the key components or key aspects or vehicles that we use in Brave Voices to communicate our conversation, to communicate the discussion. Storytelling, it mirrors the perspectives of survivors of gender-based violence or those who have experienced intimate partner violence, especially those who are persons with disabilities. And our first brave story is from a brave young woman, Ambassador Princess Emmanuel. She is a KYI Disability Inclusion Ambassador covering Ogoja, Cross Rivers, and Enugu State. Oh, mentioning Enugu State helps me to remember that this is a hybrid event. So we have people joining us online, as you are here on Zoom. We also have people joining us physically from the American corner in Enugu State. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's beautiful what technology has helped us to do. So it's a hybrid event, and we're having people join us not just online, but also from the American corner in Enugu State. So welcome to everyone in the American corner. So over to our brief story, our first brief story by Ambassador Princess Emmanuel, a KYI Disability Inclusion Ambassador covering Ugoja in Cross River State and Enugu State. So if Princess is available, let's hear your story. Thank you.
So Princess is trying to join. She's having some connectivity issues. So we could go ahead and I help her join so that she will be able to share her story.
Okay, so since Princess is trying to join, and I'll be grateful if I can get some of the updates on time so that I can, streamline easily. So we're going to be having a special address, and I'm hoping that our special guest is in-house. I know I saw her earlier. So we're going to be having a special address by the Public Affairs Officer, and I'm going to be reading her profile and introducing our special guests so that we can have great speech from her. So Amanda Brown is the Deputy Public Affairs Officer at the U.S. Consulate General in Lagos. And she has a distinguished career in diplomacy and international development. She is a Rangel Fellow and humanitarian leader. She has managed significant U.S. humanitarian aid. She has served across Africa and the Caribbean, and she holds a master's in African Studies from Johns Hopkins University. So with a lot of joy and a lot of happiness to have this special guest, let's make welcome Amanda Roach Brown to give us her special address. You're welcome. Do we have the Deputy Public Affairs Officer? I saw her earlier. So while we're waiting for her to join, We have a comment here from Godwin Irokaba. During women and girls with disabilities experienced some forms of gender violence, he said, I would like to recommend that Brave Voices should do a survey to glean the experiences on GBV against lockdown. Thank you, Godwin, for contribution. I also see many of such surveys that have been done. All right, so over to you. Thank you.
I think it's possible that Amanda is also having challenges because she was here earlier and then so if we could, let me try and reach out to them at the consulate.
I would ask that one of your team members kind of focuses to let us know who is in. And so while we're trying to get the Brave Voices story by Ambassador Princess Emmanuel and our special guest on, would like Melva to still come back and tell us a bit more about the Kachem Young Initiative and especially the Brave's impact. So Melva, I'm turning it back over to you to go Brave at least 3 times or more. So I would like to know some of the Braves over the years, for especially as you have brought it to the fore. So you have the floor. Team members, please go ahead and do contact Ambassador Princess Emmanuel, try to get her in, Public Affairs Officer, the Deputy Public Affairs Officer.
Thank you.
Over to you, Melva.
Thank you so much, Reki. So Brave Voices have begun in 2021 when we first had the first conference, and then subsequently in 2022 up till now. So this is the 4th Brave Voices. And one of the goals that we set was to create awareness on the gaps that exist in advocacy, because it appeared as though it was silent, the intersection between gender and disability. Because while being a female already makes you vulnerable, being a person with disability makes you even more vulnerable. And that needed to be had into consideration in advocacy, especially while we mark the 16 days activism. Brave Voices was founded also to commemorate the 16 days activism, but also with a focus on women with disabilities. But who best but persons with disabilities themselves that to champion their own cause, you know? And one of the things that we focused on doing was finding persons, while we created awareness in rural communities at grassroots level, we identified women with disabilities who needed help, especially who needed support to properly heal from discriminatory practices, especially posed by culture, and some of them also out of ignorance of the community members about inclusion or disability. And between 2021 and 2022, we were able to identify at least 10 Brave Voices. Now, Brave Voices are women who are able to, you know, pull through the odds posed to them as a result of disability, especially those odds including gender-based violence, discrimination at the community level or where they found themselves. And these women are able to brave it to survive, but also to help other women like them survive. Now, these women have become disability inclusion ambassadors in their communities, championing the cause for inclusivity, for inclusiveness at all levels, both at community leadership and in all sectors, literally. Now, one of the one of the pivotal marks for me was in 2023, when we invited some stakeholders, some local stakeholders, who then understood the importance of inclusivity, understood the importance of tailoring advocacy and ensuring that every structure meets your provides support and recovery in terms of, because oftentimes they have one stop in hospitals that attend to victims of gender-based violence. But also, that also needed to be tailored to suit women with disabilities and their concerns. And one of the things that in Ebonyi State we've been able to do is to get the government involved. So currently in Ebonyi State in Nigeria, where our work is rooted, we have been able to create a more like a court out of an accessible court for women with disabilities that cater to their health. That's victims who are women with disabilities, caters to their health and follows up with them down to both ensuring access to justice, but also ensuring that justice is properly served, but also empowering them to ensure that these women do not go, are not further vulnerable to such abuses by empowering them economically, helping them out with supporting them where they need safe homes as well. Now, these are some of the things that we hoped to achieve. And I think we surpassed that between 2021 and 2022. And one of the beautiful things is the fact that Brave Voices is not just for Nigerians. Brave Voices is an opportunity, is a platform that is offered to global stakeholders in disability inclusion to also learn best practices in terms of prevention, in terms of recovery, and in terms of ensuring that justice includes the mental well-being of victims themselves, especially when it has to do with women and girls with disability. And as we would see in the course of this conference, we would hear other advocates from other countries talk about how they've been able to champion inclusion, especially inclusive advocacy in terms of advocacy to eliminate gender-based violence, and how they have also been able to go to the rural communities at grassroots level to ensure or create awareness that has also driven change and caused the positive change that we all see. Brave Voices is, like I earlier read in my address, it's one of the, it's not just a conference, but it's a call. And I am so happy that so many are answering that call. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Amazing, amazing impact Brave Voices has had in the past years. Please, this is worthy of some kind of reaction from us. Thank you for the clap, Chinyere. That is good. And, you know, I'm really grateful for everyone that steps into the space to make impact, to allow the spaces, as it were, become inclusive. As we know, the issue around gender-based violence is multi-sectoral and cannot be handled by only civil society organizations or victims of gender-based violence themselves. So the GBV response needs all hands on deck. And that's why this year's theme in commemoration of the 16 days against gender-based violence, especially for us as women with disabilities, is very informative when it says unite, uniting, unite. So we are very grateful for everyone that continues to drop comments, you know, and it's really nice. Like I said, continue to drop your discussions around GBV, keep it relevant to the conversation. Other conversations around GBV and elimination of violence against women with disabilities, or the topics at hand. So we have great conversations happening in the chat. Paul responded to Godwin, you know, with what's happening in the US, especially in Philadelphia, and they're having great conversations. Again, Godwin, if you need a lot of information around surveys that have been done, particularly in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. You can check even online, you will see quite a few. I know as our organization, FACARE, we did carry out a survey, on COVID-19 and the impact it had on women and girls with disabilities, and it was quite an interesting one. So let's keep the conversations going. Kachem Young Initiative, thank you very much. So news reaching me is that we have our special guest joined. So we're going to be having her up soon. We still do not have Ambassador Amanda Princess on the call yet. So we're going to be taking a short break, and we will come back in a bit. So a short break of a minute, and we will be back. So in the meantime, I would like to ask anyone who is out there to respond to this question. When you hear unite, when you hear the theme for this year, where we've been asked to unite to eliminate violence against women and girls, what does that mean to you? What does that mean for us to unite? You can drop your responses in the chat window, and in this short 1-minute break, and I'll read them out. What does it mean to you for us to unite in eliminating violence against women and girls with disabilities? Please go ahead and let's have your comments, please. Still waiting for comments. So I'm seeing taking precautionary measures to prevent future occurrences is what is needed. This is the main issue in the Build Back Better campaign initiated after the pandemic. And this is from Godwin Irukaba. So we also have, it means we all have a role to play to prevent issues of gender-based violence in our communities. That's also from Godwin. I'm assuming that it's not only Godwin that is participating in this. Okay, so Tom says, unite means coming together with a shared interest and one agenda. Unite means sharing power between all participants. I really like that perspective, sharing power between all participants. And it is true that when it comes to the gender-based violence response, sometimes, especially where vulnerabilities are increased because of disability, there's a tendency for the response to GBV to take away power from the victim of the gender-based violence. Rhoda Nakungu says, uniting is about collaborating and pooling resources together to address the concerns of women with disabilities regarding GBV. Wow, great contributions. Let's see. Kemi says, having one voice against gender-based violence in our community. Beautiful, having one voice. And I like where Godwin started the conversation, where he said that Build Back Better campaign also is important because we must build back, and it cannot be done. We cannot by the assistant public officer is from Ngozi Nweboyin. If I destroy your name, I apologize. But Ngozi says, unite comes in because, as you rightly mentioned, GBV is a multi-sectoral issue. Therefore, to unite is a call for all sectors, which includes everyone, to come together from different capacities with a focus on this one issue, gender-based violence. So whether you're in the medical sector and whatever aspect of the medical sector, whether it's preventive medicine, whether it's clinical medicine, whether it's mental health, all sectors. And if you are a protector, that is the police, legal, every sector needs to come together. Let's unite. And Paul says, unite means that what affects one affects all. And I'm sure COVID-19 showed us that indeed what affects one really does affect all. Same thing with gender-based violence. Although it is called gender-based violence, it is not a gender-limited issue. Exactly. Men, women, non-identity, whatever gender spectrum you fall under, everyone has a role. Wow, great conversations, beautiful contributions. And let's keep them coming. What does unite mean to you? And as we focus on what unite means, I'm going to be coming back to you later to ask you what you think your role is in us uniting. So really reflect on that. What role do you feel that you need to play in your own space in this call to unite? So without wasting time, and I'm hoping this goes, would like to have our special guest give the speech. And I'm going to reintroduce our Deputy Public Affairs Officer so that we can have her speech. So the Deputy Public Affairs Officer at the U.S. Consulate General in Lagos is Amanda Roach Brown. She has a distinguished career in diplomacy and international development. She is a Rangel Fellow and a humanitarian leader. She has managed significant U.S. humanitarian aid. She has served across Africa and the Caribbean and holds a master's in African Studies from Johns Hopkins University. And of course, doing the sign language interpretation from this time is Chioma Festus. So if you are joining us and you need that accessibility feature, please look for Chioma Festus. Chioma, after this, I would like you to rename your slide, or the host, please rename Chioma as Chioma Festus Sign Language. Okay, I do not. Okay, can somebody please respond to my messages, my direct messages on the chat window? And if we're having connectivity challenges, we can move on to the next thing on the item easily, quite easily. But I need to be communicated to be able to do that. So Melva, Ngozi, whoever is at the back, it would be nice to have some level of information, and that would help. If our special guest isn't ready, we can easily slide into the next. Okay, I see Amanda. Awesome. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You're welcome.
Okay, fantastic. So I want to say good afternoon for those of us who are on the continent. Good morning for those who might be joining us from the United States. And thank you for working with us as we had some technical challenges. But we're very happy to be here virtually, based out of the Consulate General in Lagos, and to be supporting Brave Voices International Conference 2024. Before I begin, I first, of course, want to acknowledge the organizers of this event, Friki and Nkechi, and all others who worked to put this together. I understand it's an annual program, and for me, it's just great that I can join you and participate in this edition. One thing I wanted to mention about the organizers is that they both are alumni of one of the US government's flagship programs for youth in Africa, and that's the Mandela Washington Fellowship Program. And this is a program that identifies young leaders who are already doing great things in their communities, and then invites them to come to the United States for a 6-week program to network with other young leaders on the continents. And we've heard from many of them that ability to connect not just with other young people from the continent, but also with Americans, then gives them even more inspiration and connections to continue the great work that they're doing. And of course, we can see that is happening and unfolding in this conference. The second thing that I wanted to mention, so you read my bio a bit, but particularly this topic and what we're discussing today really resonates with me, and it's something that I've dedicated quite a bit of my own studies and work to addressing, particularly as it relates to gender-based violence, women's rights, and in specific fields, for example, of trafficking in persons. I think there's some people who have joined us who work on gender-based violence and how it shows itself in trafficking, but also in refugee communities. So I worked for a while for the US government, managing the humanitarian aid that went to refugees in Sudan and South Sudan. And we know that in those situations of conflict, gender-based violence is exacerbated. So this is something that I've studied and worked in for a very long time. So it brought me great pleasure as I am listening to some of the comments and the discussions that everyone is talking about the things that they know are needed to help move forward and eliminate gender-based violence altogether, but really to give also victims resources to make sure that we're working together so that people who have experienced gender-based violence, they know where they can go and where they can turn. More broadly too, I just wanted to talk about what is the government role? And I think that's something that many of those who are joining us today are from civil society, then you have government, you have individuals, but I think it's important that to understand we need all of those different groups, different stakeholders working together to really bring resources to those who might have experienced gender-based violence. And of course, to train and to give sensitization campaigns to younger people so that they understand how they themselves might not fall victim to gender-based violence or what to do if something does happen and how to report it. From the US government standpoint, the work that we do to work against gender-based violence really is one of the cornerstones of our work as it relates to human rights. And we talk about it in a human rights sense. Many of you, I'm sure, know that tomorrow is International Human Rights Day. And it's really important because we see human rights and women's protection as integral to that campaign. Some of the work that we do around the world is we support organizations as they do particularly grassroots campaigns to have people from all aspects of life understand their role in preventing gender-based violence. So that comes from understanding and making sure that young girls know what their rights are as it relates to gender-based violence, working with law enforcement so that they understand how to properly receive and work with victims of gender-based violence, right? It's very important, particularly on the continent where we see many people in the law enforcement field are men, and they might not be as sensitive to understanding how you have to work with somebody who has just experienced a traumatic event. So we do trainings that are particularly geared towards law enforcement, police, but also military units. And then, of course, we work with civil society organizations. And really the work there is to support what they're already doing. I think it's important for me to say that we know the people who understand the problem the best are those who are at the root of it. So a lot of times for us, civil society organizations really already understand what is happening in their communities. And many times what they're just looking for is perhaps additional financial support or connections to government entities that they might not have previously had a chance to work with, so that we can just amplify the work that they do. I also wanted to mention that we understand part of this too is the health component of it. After someone perhaps is a victim of gender-based violence, it's so important not just to report to law enforcement, but also that they seek and are able to get the medical attention that they deserve. So a lot of what the US government does in Nigeria, actually one of the biggest pieces of our bilateral assistance is in supporting the health infrastructure here in the country. And a lot of that also goes towards making sure that local hospitals and clinics and those who work in them have the supplies and resources they need to best treat those who might be victims of gender-based violence. So in closing, what I just want to say is I want to congratulate and commend everyone for being on this call. You know, in a time where we have so many competing priorities, I think it's important that there are people who are really dedicated to helping to prevent gender-based violence and stopping it in all forms. I see we also have men on the call, and I think that's fantastic because this cannot be a conversation that women have amongst women. You know, we understand that gender-based violence is not something that only happens to women. Men are also victims of this. But also it's important that on both sides, both men and women are speaking out and advocating against gender-based violence in our community. And lastly, I do also want to commend the intersectionality that's being discussed here in this conference. Particularly, we know that gender-based violence affects all people, but we know that there are people with disabilities are victims and experience gender-based violence at times at higher rates than others, just because they're a person with disabilities. And we know that that is just so unacceptable. So the fact that this particular conference is focused also on having that discussion about the intersectionality of being both a woman and also a person with disabilities, and what does that mean in terms of where can resources be found? Maybe we have to be a bit more equitable in our approach to understand that there are people with different needs, but this is an overarching problem that affects us all. So again, in closing, I just want to say thank you for your dedication to this cause and for rallying together, as I understand it, every year, so that we can come together and learn and share resources and work towards a world where we can prevent gender-based violence. Thank you.
Wow, amazing. Can we do a clap, clap, clap this time, SLI, all of them? Thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda, for that great, great, great speech, hitting a lot of truths, especially with respect to how important it is for us to unite the different sectors. She talked about the importance of male involvement, the male gender involvement in the conversations and in the response to gender-based violence. She also spoke to the fact that in a world where so many social issues are trying to be focused, it is important for players who are in this fight to stay focused and continue to push for the right things to begin to happen so that we can indeed prevent and eliminate gender-based violence. So it would have been nice for us to hear a brief story, but we still don't have them in the house. But anything that resonated with you in the course of that speech, I want you to please drop in the chat. Remember, try to keep the conversations relevant to current conversations ongoing, okay? Because everybody has all sorts of experiences. But as the conversation is going on, you know, vocally, it would be also nice if that is reflected in the chat. So let's keep the conversations within the context of conversations per time so that we can read them out. So, and Godwin, you've been saying the things that you would like. I want you to talk about things also that you are also doing in your own space. It's time for us to begin to take responsibility as we unite. So that's the next question. What are you doing in your own space, as it were, in the process of uniting? Tell us a bit about what you are doing, and I would be glad to read out what you are doing because we want to connect. We need more partners, more stakeholders to carry out a lot of more inclusive advocacy when it comes to elimination of violence against women. So Thank you very much. So let's do that. So we're going to be having a very important segment. And once again, thank you, Amanda, for that beautiful, beautiful speech that, that was given from the U.S. Consulate Lagos. Thank you. But we're going to be going over to our panel discussion. And our panelists are in the house. They are here, and we're going to have great conversations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly introduce each of them, and then I will introduce the moderator for the panel session and hand over to her. So our first panelist is Rhoda Nakungu. And once again, please go ahead and pin the SLI. If you need the accessibility feature, please go ahead and pin our sign language interpreter. You can pin her. What you can do is you go to the sign language interpreter screen, and current sign language interpreter is Chioma Festus sign language interpreter, right? Okay, so go to her screen directly. The three icons on her screen, one of the options is pin. So if you need the accessibility feature, it's something that you can do from your own end. Chioma, okay. I hope she's still the SLI. So go ahead and pin either Chioma or Rachel, but it's Chioma Festus currently. All right, let me return back to the introductions. Oh, and Chioma, your video is switched off, so we need to check that. Okay, so we're back to Rachel. It's exhausting. So we're back to Rachel. So I'm trying to make sure that we're inclusive as possible. So we're back to Rachel as a sign language
No, we're back
interpreter.
to Hope.
So
Hope Eze is the sign language interpreter for now. Yes.
wow, we're all over the place. Hope. Okay, find the sign language interpreter and please ping. Thank you. All right. I don't think I can keep doing that. So just note all of them. Their names have SLI. Whoever is actively signing, please go ahead and pin that person per time. Okay, and I would like to encourage the SLIs, don't switch back and forth too much. It can be confusing. Just keep it, within time frames. It helps. Thank you. All right, let's do this. So we're going to be having the panel conversations. Our first panelist is Rhoda Nakungu. Rhoda Nakungu is a Ugandan lawyer and human rights advocate specializing in public interest litigation and disability inclusion, with extensive experience in national and international human rights law. So we're going to be having Rhoda as a panelist. Our next panelist is Omashani Naidu. Omashani Naidu is the acting deputy director of public prosecution in South Africa, specializing in sexual offenses, gender-based violence advocacy, and stakeholder training, with extensive experience in prosecution and policy development. And our last panelist is Paul Sachs, a licensed psychologist in Pennsylvania, USA, and certified in rehabilitation psychology. He's worked for over 20 years as a non-profit executive for programs serving individuals with mental health and substance use challenges. Currently, he works independently as a consultant, trainer, and coach. So we welcome all our panelists, Paul, Naidu, Rhoda. You are welcome. And of course, to moderate the session is our convener, Melva. She's going to be the convener and the moderator, of this panel conversation. They will tell us the focus of conversation for the panel discussion, as well as a direction. And we're going to be doing this in the next 30 minutes. So we'll be having the panel conversation for the next 30 minutes. Remember, if you have contributions to the conversation, please feel free to drop in the chat window, If you have any questions for the panelists, we will take them after the panel session. Please drop in the chat window. After the 30 minutes mark, the panelists will still be there and will ask any questions you may have and for the next 20 minutes. So please, let's have Melva take over the panel session with Naidu, Rhoda, and Paul. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Treki. It's nice to see you again, Rhoda, Omashani, and Paul. We had earlier had a pre-conference webinar, which everyone who is here can still watch on LinkedIn if you go to the Catch Them Young Initiative page. And for this panel session, we're going to be discussing rehabilitative strategies in assessing justice for victims who are women and girls with disabilities. And we're also, of course, these are experts in their various fields, and they are also thought leaders, and you're in good hands. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Rhoda. Being a lawyer and also an advocate who is especially in the field in rural Uganda, how do you ensure women with disabilities in rural areas understand their legal rights and then can assess justice after experiencing gender-based violence? And again, what strategies have you found effective in balancing both legal advocacy with emotional recovery for victims themselves? So yeah, there are two questions in one, and we have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to join this event. Once again, my name is Rhoda Nakungu, and I'm a lawyer by profession, and I specialize in public interest litigation and promoting the rights of persons, vulnerable people, inclusive of persons with disabilities. Now, in regard to how we ensure, as of right now, I'm working with Tunaweza Foundation, but I've also worked with different organizations that are into public litigation, and specifically in regard to persons with disabilities in rural areas, especially women in rural areas. My approach has been, first of all, to understand that majority of women in rural areas are illiterate, and that there is still a lot there is still a lot of observing of cultures that promote male chauvinism. So the first point to note is that women with disabilities in rural settings are not only disabled, but they are also marginalized in different kinds of ways, in that they are illiterate, and then they are disabled, and then they are women. So understanding that has determined the modes of ensuring that they access, the modes we use to ensure that they are able to understand their rights. Firstly, we have drafted creative means of advocacy. We understand as lawyers that sometimes, we get carried away with legal jargon, in that we forget that, the people we're dealing with are not lawyers. So the first thing was to understand that the people we're dealing with, first of all, they are not lawyers, most of them are illiterate, and then most of them actually have limitations to their movement. So what we did is, number one, we carried our legal services to the community. When we go to rural areas, we have an office, but then we carry the legal services to the community. For instance, now, like, there is a project I was implementing in Bundibujo district in the Rwenzori region in Uganda, and Bundibujo district is really mountainous. So that means that even like people in the mountainous areas, if there is a woman with a disability in the mountainous area, like when you conduct outreaches in the town areas, they will not be able to access your services because most of them cannot move. And then transportation, it being a rural area, is really hard because of accessibility. So what we used to do is that we used to conduct community outreaches in the different settings, in the different areas. So what we would do, would work with the community leaders, the cultural leaders, and they would give us space. So it was more like an informal setting would go to their gardens, would go to gardens, would go to schools, would go to the homes of the chairman, would sit in like community unions. For instance, most of the women have like saving schemes where they have offices. So we would go as far as taking our services to the community to make sure that no one is left behind. And then sometimes we used to hold actually mediation sessions whereby like would even convene with clan members. So after a mediation session, we'd use that opportunity to teach people about the different rights of persons with disabilities and altogether persons of vulnerable and indigent people. So one of the mechanisms I realized that it's important to take services to the community as opposed to staying in offices. So when you take services to the community, you're able to know like the limitations of who, and then everyone is able to participate. So we also participated in schools so that we don't leave girls behind, because as we are working with women, we are also supposed to work with girls, especially girls who are in schools and girls who are not in schools. So girls who are in schools, we reach them through community outreaches. Girls who are not in schools, girls who are in schools, we reach them through through outreaches in schools, and girls who are not in schools, we reach them through community outreaches. And secondly, also, as I noted before, we keep it simple. Like the modes of advocacy that you use for a person who is in a hard-to-reach area are not the modes of advocacy you use for a person who is in town. So rural areas, we understand that most people don't understand English. Most people do not understand legal jargon. Most people might not even might not be able to follow a conversation for quite a long time. So what we would do is that we would use creative means such as play, such as songs, that theater of the oppressed, so that we make sure that the community is involved in the discussions. In this way, we are able to capture the attention of everyone, because sometimes we get people from the community, like a drama group from the community. We train them in the rights of persons with disabilities, women with disabilities, gender-based violence. So when we go to the communities, our role is first to introduce the topic, and then the group will perform, it will sing songs, it will act. Then after that, we will go on and add to the message that has already been delivered. And then with theater of the oppressed, it even allows like the community or the people you're impacting to contribute to what you're saying or to give their views. So that would ensure that, persons with disabilities and altogether the local community is able to understand the message that you're trying to deliver. And then another thing is it's very important to use materials like advocacy materials, because they leave a more lasting. It's a more lasting impact they leave a more lasting impact than when you speak or you act and then you go. So what we would do, we would make posters. We make posters where we use imagery, and then also we use imagery, and then we deliver the information. We write the information in both the local language and in English. So with the posters, we distribute posters, t-shirts, caps. So these are things that people wear everywhere. Someone goes to dig, and then they are wearing like a t-shirt. So even a person with a disability who did not attend is able to see the picture and read something in their language, so they are able to know their rights. And then also using slogans. Slogans are also very important, because when a slogan is said somewhere, it's repeated everywhere in the community. And then even a person who didn't attend that outreach is able to know, or they're inquisitive, they know what does this slogan mean. And then they're able to do what? To know more about their rights. Further, also in terms of accessibility, we used to, or sometimes we do radio talk shows, because most people in village areas, most people do not move to the town area. However, the most effective means of communication they use is the radio. So because everyone listens to the radio, we always have like a radio program when we go for our outreaches. So we communicate on radio, we act. Sometimes also we do short skits, or we get someone who understands their language. We do a short skit about GBV, against persons with disabilities, or altogether violence against women and girls. Then after the short skit, Now we follow it with the information. And then the short skits capture their attention. So they're able to call in and then they ask about different scenarios. And then sometimes we even give them advice about the problems that they might be facing. So those are some of the means that we use. And then another thing is also it's important to involve the community. So what we do in most cases, as mentioned, we hold the outreaches in a non-formal setting, but then also make sure that we train their community leaders, and then also we train church leaders, and then we train, sometimes we even train persons with disabilities, so that they feel that the information we are giving them is actually owned by them. So those are the innovative ways that we use to ensure that persons with disabilities are able to understand their rights. Then, Melba, sorry, can you kindly repeat for me the second part?
Absolutely. So I asked about the strategies that you have found to be an effective way of balancing legal advocacy with emotional recovery for victims.
Okay, so the strategies that are found to be effective actually in advocacy, I think those are some of the things I have mentioned. Is it in accessing justice or ensuring that they understand their rights? Sorry for clarity.
While they are assessing justice, while they are seeking to assess justice, sometimes we tend to be too focused on the justice and forget that these are victims who also need recovery. So how are you able to balance trying to help them assess justice? You've talked about the awareness, how you get to ensure that no one is left behind in understanding their rights. But also, how are you able to balance that emotional trauma that a victim is feeling with also trying to ensure that they access justice?
Okay then. So firstly, maybe briefly, how we ensure that they access justice is through providing legal aid. So we offer free legal representation for persons with disabilities. We take up their cases, like we register their cases, file for them. But then the most effective means we've used to ensure that they access justice, especially in cases that are not grave, is alternative dispute resolution, because the adversarial court system is a bit stressing, especially for persons with disabilities, requesting them to come and attend court, and then also having to, having to go through all that long procedure, because either way you find that justice in the adversarial court system is not immediate, it takes quite some time. So you might find that even the injustice committed against this person is continuing. So what we usually do, if it's a case of discrimination or economic marginalization, for such cases we do mediations. So we invite the other party, we write a letter to the other party, we invite them, then we try to mediate, and then we make sure that we come to a concession. Then after that, we make sure that we follow up on compliance. However, in some cases where they fail to comply, then that's where collaboration comes in. Because most of our cases in rural areas, most of our projects in rural areas are short term. So what we do is we collaborate with other legal organizations to make sure that we refer the cases, the legal organizations that are based in that particular rural area where we are addressing such cases. We refer the cases, then we make sure that we follow up after some time to see how they are doing. And then how we also balance the emotional bit is, in most cases when we are handling such cases, we are really sensitive because we know that most of these women have gone through trauma, and we know most of them are even hesitant to share their cases, especially when it comes to GBV. So what we first do is that we make sure that we create a safe space. In most cases, it is a woman to first interview, to conduct the interviews of someone, and then we make sure that they are comfortable before we conduct an interview. And then even before we choose a legal recourse, we first ask them whether they are okay with it. We explain it to them to avoid escalating the situation. But then when it comes now to the emotional bit, because ours is mainly legal, what we do still is collaboration. So if we we know that maybe, a woman, she has suffered maybe sexual violence, or a girl has suffered defilement. So in addition to the legal help we give her, we make sure that we link her to the right service providers, for instance, social workers, or maybe counselors, and then even in hospitals, in those different places there, we link them to the facilities that are in charge, and also maybe like some police units have units that counsel such people. So that's how we ensure that we don't only help them, but also we link them to the right service providers regarding the kind of maybe emotional need that they have. Thank you so much, Melba.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. We're going to move on to you, Omashani. Welcome back to Brave Voices again. I'm going to ask what steps you have taken within South African justice system to ensure cases involving women with disabilities are handled sensitively and effectively. And again, based on your experience, how do you advise that prosecutorial processes be adapted to better support the recovery of victims with disabilities while pursuing justice?
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. I think those two questions are quite essential as we address the issues around gender-based violence, and let's also look at femicide. So within the criminal justice system, legislation plays a very vital role. And having the legislation at the forefront in addressing the manner in which we implement is very important. So let's start off there first. In terms of the legislation, legislation in addressing gender-based violence is important. In South Africa, we've had sexual offences legislation that stands at the forefront in addressing gender-based violence. Piece of legislation that had come into effect in 2007 already took away the instances of gender-specific crimes. It also brought about an instance of looking at the definition of rape, and rape being rape not only through the vagina, but also through the anus or other body parts. But it also spoke, more importantly, about the use of other objects. So that was massive accolade in terms of the legislation. But also in that, as we go on and we talk about legislation and the development of legislation, to look at, and again, and I want to stress this, when we talk about persons with mental or persons with disability, disability is not only physical. Disability is also mental. Disability is also psychological. And where we take these factors into account is the area with the amended legislation looking at persons with vulnerability, and that is important. In terms of legislation, and it's the Sexual Offences and Related Matters Act that has Chapter 4 that speaks specifically to persons with disability. Now, that's a massive accolade in terms of legislation, because it shows and talks to issues around sexual exploitation with persons with disability. It talks about using persons with disability for online sexual exploitation. That's just some of the offenses. It talks about benefiting from the sexual exploitation with persons with disability. Chapter 3 talks specifically about children. The same offenses that happen in terms of Chapter 3 has been replicated in terms of Chapter 4. Now, what else is important? In terms of us and dealing with gender-based violence within the criminal justice system, Rhoda has so brilliantly put it. It's us understanding. If I understand that a person that walks into my office, and I shouldn't have any prejudice, the fact that she wore a short skirt on the day of the incident, the fact that she had gone to a tavern on the day of the incident when she was raped, does it give a person, the perpetrator, the right to rape her? And the answer is no. The clothes that I wear should not give you the right to rape me. The places that I visit shouldn't give you the right to rape me. But it's understanding. Each of us have our own beliefs. For us to say that, I don't like a lady with the red hair because it's a personal belief, doesn't mean that I've got to impute that on the person that's in front of me. Because the person in front of me, being a rape survivor, could have red hair. So all the prejudices need to come out. And our legislation says that when we train, when we deal with gender-based violence, we need to get trained on social context. And I know Paul will talk about that as the expert in psychology. We'll talk about the impact that social context has on each individual dealing with gender-based violence. From the time the person walks through a police station, to the time that the person comes to court, to the time that the person appears before a judicial officer, all areas of social context and prejudices must go out that door. What's also important is, again, and as we address how we make it an effective criminal justice system, it's training. The first aspect we train on is social context. And those biasness and those prejudices that you have stays outside your door when you deal with a survivor of gender-based violence. Let's take it one step further. How do we make sure that the system succeeds? In South Africa, we have a Thuthuzela Care Center model. What is the Thuthuzela Care Center model? It is a one-stop rape crisis center. How often have you heard that when I go to a police station to report that I have been raped after consuming 2 cans of beer or going out with my friends and having a good time, and now I go into a police station and I report I've been raped? Reality, again, back to social context. Not everybody is going to react the same way. Or I go into a police station and I say and I'm a male, and I say my wife has hit me. And then I met with her who wears the pants in this relationship. How can your wife beat you up? But a Thuthuzela Care Center, as a one-stop rape crisis center, you are welcomed into the center by a TCC coordinator. She's not telling you, I know how you feel, because nobody will ever know how you feel. She takes you through a system. Again, like any of us, you will always fear the unknown. That's just human nature. And Paul will talk to that as well. It's human nature. But in saying that, here you walk into the TCC and you are met by somebody that will explain the entire process to you. That you will have your vitals taken by a nurse. You will be examined by a doctor. It might be a bit intrusive, but the doctor needs to get all of that information from you, from the bruises that tells me it's a healing wound to the current bruises that you have, an open wounds. But the doctor also needs to take swabs from you. Those swabs are for DNA purposes, and it's going to be intrusive. You're not going to lie because it is an intrusive process. But there'll be a nurse that's going to be present. And once you're done, you can have a shower. Why? Because like Rhoda said, awareness is very important. And as we create awareness in the community, what awareness are we creating? You have to secure DNA evidence within 72 hours of the incident having happened. I've heard Rhoda, because Rhoda came into the rural areas and she told us about that. So I didn't have a shower. My perpetrator also asked me to do oral sex or have oral sex. I was also told not to wash my mouth or have something to eat. And as a result, once the doctor has taken a swab of my mouth and has taken a swab of my genitalia, I now am done. The doctor's also taken away my clothes. You know why he's taken away my clothes? Because that's going to go to the DNA lab for analysis. Once that is done, I now have a shower. Because I was told not to have a shower. Once that is done, I'm so hungry. I'm given a new set of clothes and I have something to eat. I don't want to talk right now, but give me a little bit of time. Once that is done, I'm showed a police official's office where the police official, again, has also been trained and takes down my statement in a manner that I can explain. I'm a 7-year-old child. I'm a 65-year-old woman. So the statement is taken down in a language that I understand, in a manner in which somebody would be able to read it. Once that's done, there's also a social worker that's present. Again, I will always refer to Paul. And then the psychosocial intervention comes in. Because without psychosocial intervention, how do you heal? Let me also tell you that when somebody walks into the TCC, especially as a child, Do they come alone? And the answer is no. A caregiver will come with you. A parent, a guardian will come with you. Just as you cry as a survivor, so too does a parent, guardian, and caregiver cry with you. So the psychosocial services is not only for the survivor, but also for that family structure. Why? Because the road ahead is going to be a difficult road. Let me also tell you what the legislation says. The legislation also talks about the worst thing that you would like to contract in terms of a disease would be HIV. So as the law says, it provides the victim the right to apply within 90 days to determine the HIV status of the perpetrator. Why? So that I, as a victim, can make those decisions in terms of ARVs, in terms of whether I'm going to claim for damages, as in monetary compensation from the perpetrator if he knew his HIV status. Number 3, as a prosecutor, I'm going to add an additional charge to the perpetrator being attempted murder. All of that information is important. What's also important is I don't want to hear anything about this, but who can make the application for me? My parent, my spouse, my partner, my teacher, the investigating officer, an interested party. Let me also tell you about how the law needs to adapt. Because if the law is adapted and you have like we have a national register for sex offenders, if you've been convicted of a sexual offense, any sexual offense, your name goes onto a national register for sex offenders. You cannot work with children or vulnerable persons. Number 1. Number 2, I, as the employer, also need to check on that register to make sure the person I'm employing does not have a previous conviction for a sexual offense. Let's talk about the link between the both in terms of the criminal justice system and what we're putting in place. Again, a court environment is very daunting. Again, you'll get 2 types of survivors. The one that wants to see the perpetrator and face the perpetrator head on, and the second one that wants to have nothing to do with the perpetrator. So if I'm that victim that wants to face the perpetrator, I want to be in court. But the court is going to be cleared. It's not for anybody else to be there except for the legal officials and the accused and his representative or her. Then you're going to say, I don't want to see him. If I see him, I'm going to take 10 steps back therapeutically. So then I can testify as an adult. I can testify in a separate room. Then you have a situation, and like Rhoda mentioned, legal jargon is horrible. If you ask a child, and we do this in court, my lady, my lord, the other party, and when you start talking, my lady, my lord, the other party, and you start telling a child, the party on the other side, what party does a child understand? A Barney party, a Mickey Mouse party? Child doesn't understand it's the legal word for the defense counsel. So they're going to get confused. And if the child is confused, the magistrate or the judicial officer is going to say, this child is not competent. But you have somebody called an intermediary. And the intermediary is the person, like a teacher, a social worker, that talks to a child in language that a child understands. Paul again will talk about how not only children, but show people with attention deficit problems, autistic persons, whom we will put under the umbrella of vulnerable persons. Attention span is limited. So right now, it's in South Africa, it's 2:30. It's way past my bedtime. I was actually supposed to have had a nap or had something to eat and had a nap. That's what I do after I finish school. But now I'm in court and I'm so tired. The intermediary is going to tell the court, the judicial officer, Your Worship, my lady, my lord, the complainant right now is a bit tired. She's getting a bit irritable. Can we adjourn? That's in the interest of justice, but it's also in the best interest of the child. These are another very important aspect, and I know we have a time limit. So when we're looking at, and again, with the erosion of time, there's circumstances that have changed. Not every person that has a hearing disability will go for formal schooling. That is a reality. And as a result, our law has recognized that courts must take into account gestures that a person that has a hearing disability will use to communicate their a transgression. Again, that's a massive accolade in terms of the law, because the courts understand that persons with disability will not, or hearing disability will not always speak the same language. Also important is, again, the buck stops with us. We need to educate our employees to be able to at least be in a position to accommodate or understand sign language interpretation or sign language, or so that they can communicate. Our Tutuzela care centers, our courts are equipped so as to accommodate persons with disability with ramps, etc. Madam Facilitator, I know you're going to ask the question, what about persons with sight and hearing disability? How are they accommodated within a court environment or a Tutuzela care center? A relationship with the Department of Justice allows for court or sign language or language services to be made available. So a simple call to say, on this particular date, we're going to have a consultation. Can we have an interpreter to be available to help us through the process? Also important is when we're looking, again, it's training. If we train and we train all our stakeholders to be gender sensitive, then I think that the war against GBV is won. So in a nutshell then, Madam Facilitator, that is what is being done in South Africa, what can be done holistically. But again, very importantly, it's something that cannot be done alone. We cannot underestimate the importance of psychosocial therapy. We cannot underestimate the importance of DNA evidence. We cannot underestimate the importance of audiovisual evidence. Again, not everybody is going to be comfortable to come into a court environment, but just like how we're doing this conference through audiovisual, let's make use of audiovisual so that we don't have a daunting environment of a court to be faced with. So in saying all of that, legislation has accommodated all of these. We've done it during COVID. Somebody mentioned COVID. We've done it during COVID. We need to adapt to suit their instance. And so with that being said, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. This has really been robust. And I hope all the advocates here are listening, because this has been quite a great listen, but also it has also been a way for people to learn what the Tutuzela Care Center is doing and how that can be adapted into our various systems to ensure that we achieve our goals. Thank you so much again, Omashani. And over to you, Dr. Paul. You have been mentioned and mentioned and mentioned, and now we've come to you. You have worked with many victims and have coached many advocates across Africa and beyond based on your professional experience. So what role does mental health support play in helping survivors with disabilities rebuild their lives after experiencing gender-based violence?
Okay. First of all, thank you, Melva, for having this event and for your leadership. And thank you, Rhoda and Omashani, for throwing down the gauntlet for me to follow up on psychosocial issues. And also thank you to Freki, who once again is a wonderful host for this event. So I'm pleased to be here. A couple of things to bring up regarding mental health. First of all, let me just say that to pick up on some of the things that were talked about already. One, we want to talk about mental health. We actually want to talk about total health rather than mental health. And I think our earlier speaker from the consulate spoke about the importance of health in general. Good health involves mental and physical health. We are not nicely divided up into a psychological and a physical component. And therefore, when we're talking about mental health, we also need to talk about physical health and vice versa. And therefore, managing your mental health also means managing your physical health. We know that sleep disturbance is a common post-traumatic problem as well as a problem in many other areas, and it can have an impact on one's physical and mental condition. So being attuned to a total health holistic view is an important way to address any psychological problem, but also particularly those for people who have been victims of trauma and gender-based violence. The other thing that I always hang on to is from the sanctuary model of trauma-informed services, which actually was founded in Philadelphia, to ask the question, don't ask what's wrong with you, ask what happened to you. And this is such an important thing and an important, as I think Rhoda said, a sort of slogan to take with you. If you can carry on one thing when you meet somebody who is a victim of trauma, it is to say, tell me what happened, not what's wrong with you. And particularly in the case of persons with disabilities, I think there is a tendency to focus on the disability first, regardless of what it is, whether it's a sensory, physical, or other type of disability, and have that overshadow the fact that that's just one aspect of a person. And we want to focus on the whole person and not just on the disability. So in terms of, and then to pick up on something that Omashani mentioned, we also want to be attuned to the social determinants of health and the social environment, the context. When we meet with people who have any sort of problem, we tend to focus on the person, and that's only natural. After all, they are the victim, and they're the ones that are hopefully able to talk about their situation, but we want to consider their context. And when we think about how to help them with their mental health challenges, we want to not just about what we can do with them internally to help them think differently or feel differently about the experience, but also to think about how we can modify their environment. And that goes back to the comment in the chat from, I think, Godwin about the pandemic and the increase in domestic violence and other things that we saw after with the isolation that people, the confinement that people felt, is what can we do to change the environment so that we can reduce the amount of distress that a person might be experiencing. Mental health challenges in terms of addressing the other issues, because I know you have another issue that you'd like me to comment on, is when we're working with persons with disability and we're working with persons who are victims of gender-based violence, but I'll start with the disability in general. Everything is not about the disability. People who have disabilities also have other psychological and physical problems. A person can be depressed, and it's not depressed because they need a wheelchair for mobility. They can be depressed because they're having a bad day or they're having a very difficult life experience. And we want to make sure that we focus on the issue at hand rather than presume that it is related to the disability. In terms of other interventions, another one that I think is very important to put out is boundaries. And in fact, one would say that the boundaries are one of the essential parts of law by establishing boundaries. But if we're talking about psychological boundaries, domestic violence is a violation of a boundary. Child abuse is a violation of a boundary. Persons with disabilities, particularly those that may use physical aids for mobility, often find that their boundaries are violated. People will put their hand on the wheelchair of somebody who needs a wheelchair. Well, hold on a minute. That's a part of who they are. Wouldn't necessarily put your hand on the person's shoulder or their elbow without asking for their permission, but yet people seem to feel free to violate a boundary with a person with a disability by coming up a little too close or by making presumptions about what that person would like them to do. Talking loudly to somebody, even though they don't have a hearing impairment, but they have some other type of disability, is another way that people sort of violate a boundary. So one thing for persons who are experienced trauma is to help them to recognize boundaries and to advocate for their own boundaries and establish those boundaries. This, of course, means sensitizing other people to the importance of boundaries so that they can recognize this as well. But it is important to, I like to talk about, do I like to talk about it? Well, I find it necessary to talk about boundaries with people. In terms of two other points I'll make, in terms of, though this I think bleeds a little into the other topic that you wanted me to speak about, but in terms of the awareness and training of staff, for example, in the United States, in my state of Pennsylvania, and I think in most states in the United States, it's required for my psychology license to have a every other year training in the Child Protective Services laws, so that I know about what are the requirements for child abuse reporting and what are the what is child abuse and what are the reporting requirements. I must have that, or I may not maintain my license, and that's true for other mental health professionals. There is not such similar legislation or requirements for gender-based violence. I think that having trained practitioners be sensitized to this and having it be a requirement is something that I would advocate for, or have advocated for, excuse me, in helping to create a well-informed cohort of practitioners, whether they are mental health, legal, or otherwise, or medical practitioners. I'm going to pause there, and I know you have another point you'd ask me to speak about, so I'll pause there for a moment.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that we hear is how important it is to work together to ensure that both recovery and justice is assessed. So how do you think that communities and systems can collaborate to provide both justice and long-term emotional recovery for victims? What's your advice on that?
Okay, so that general question focuses on the issue of a trauma-informed system of care, which I think Omashani described very, very well. One point that I'll add to that is that we want to be a trauma-informed, well, let me back up. A trauma-informed system of care provides safety, provides training for all people, not just the ones who have direct contact, even the person that answers the phone or the security guard that is at the facility. All of them should have training in what are the signs of trauma, what could cause trauma, what are some of the effects that we might see either immediately or delayed in a person who is a victim of trauma. The other part that I think is important to mention in a trauma-informed environment is being aware of secondary trauma. It is extremely difficult to work with persons who are victims of trauma. It causes us to reflect on our own experiences, whether we had experiences of those or we knew someone, or simply the emotions can be overpowering. And we need to be sensitive to the care that the persons in systems of care are facing and to try to prevent secondary trauma. Just as we try to prevent secondary trauma by having a woman who was a rape victim coming in and being traumatized by repeated questions or by the manner that they are being treated by whoever is working with them to get them the care that they need and to record the incident. We also want to be aware of the practitioners themselves, the people that are coming in contact. Sometimes they see very, very difficult situations, and if they are seeing somebody over a period of time, it can cause a lot of secondary trauma, and we need to be able to help people in that way. So all of these things are creating an awareness of trauma, and in communities to recognize, as I think I put in a comment, that what affects one affects all, and knowing that there is a connection and not presuming that I can somehow isolate myself. Another thing that I think is important, and Omashani and I could probably have a sidebar about this, is when she talked about all prejudices going out the door. Well, that would be nice, but no one's prejudices ever go out the door. We always carry prejudices, and so I would say know thyself is the important thing, that we need to continually tell people to reflect on how they are feeling, and we need to give them the opportunity to reflect and to be able to feel safe to reflect on that, because they may have felt judgmental, and to understand that that's part of the learning process. We need to know what our own vulnerabilities are so that we know how to better manage them. And yes, we do need to tell people that there are boundaries, and these prejudices have no room in this environment to be expressed. But we recognize that you may have prejudices, and we want to give you the opportunity to reflect on them and to recognize them. So knowing oneself is an important thing in the process as well. As far as communities, we want to recognize that each community has a lot of indigenous knowledge. And depending on how you define a community, especially in a rural community, but it could be in any neighborhood or area. And we want to collect all of the natural supports that exist in that community and the local knowledge of the persons who are from all areas of activity in that community, and realize that each person has something to contribute, as well as has some impact, will be impacted by the gender-based violence event. I think and just as an example of this in terms of how to seek help, in Philadelphia, for example, what I'm actually working with a group on now is that a lot of people go to clinics for mental health services, and that's great. But not everybody can get away from the family because they have childcare responsibilities or elder care responsibilities, or they simply can't afford to take a bus or a train. And we need to bring the services to them. And so what we're proposing, and I know I have the support of the commissioner in Philadelphia, but I don't know if we'll get there, is to have satellite locations where people can access mental health services, in recreational centers where people are likely to go, in faith-based communities and in senior centers where they're more likely to go, and where the stigma of going to a mental health center is less. You happen to be playing basketball after school at the rec center, and by the way, there's a place where you can also talk to somebody, whether it's remotely or in person, about a mental health challenge. We're more likely to get access to people, having people gain access to mental health care when we bring it to them rather than expect them to come to us. So in terms of how communities can to better manage and support people who have disabilities and those who have disabilities and are victims of gender-based violence, is to realize that help can come in any area, in any locale. It does not have to be limited to a quote unquote official clinic. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much. This has been rich. And one of the things that I would say is, I think that one of the main goals of this panel, hearing from people from different parts of the world, is also going to be to ensure that we pick best practices and adapt to our own, or tailor it to our own realities in our various countries or communities. Because it is extremely important that if we're going to achieve our goal of ensuring inclusive advocacy against gender-based violence, that we also incorporate recovery and ensure that that is taken into cognizance in terms of access to justice as well. Thank you so much, Rhoda. Thank you, Omashani. And thank you, Paul, for being here and for having been with us all these years as well, especially to you, Paul and Omashani. Thank you so much. And we draw the curtain on our panel discussion today. If you have questions, please drop your questions in the chat box. And also, one of the things in the program is that we're going to be having a breakout session soon, where all the panelists will also be there for you to choose a room that you prefer and move in and interact with them as well. I'll hand over to Freki.
great conversations all around. Thank you so much, Naidu. Thank you, Paul, and thank you. I don't want to spoil anybody's name. And thank you for Rhoda for the contributions. I would like to read what was dropped in the chat so that, in case maybe people couldn't refer to that, they will be able to get that question and the insight as well. The question that came from Ngozi had to do with this. Regarding the issue of male chauvinism in the rural areas, do you meet resistances in rural legal outreaches? For example, men preventing their wives from attending the outreach, or male community leaders misunderstanding the objectives of the advocacy outreach? And she also asks, do you take inclusive approaches like designing advocacy outreach for men, considering GBV, gender-based violence, as an issue across both genders? Do you think this is a helpful approach? So Ngozi directed this question to Rhoda, and Rhoda responded. There have been, and she's going to still speak to it briefly, but I'll just read what she wrote here and hand over to her to just, elaborate a bit for a minute or two. So she says there have been several incidents where we have faced a lot of opposition from male customary heads. However, in these incidents, we ensure that we leverage on other means of advocacy to ensure that their communities are not left out. So I'm going to turn this over to Rhoda to talk about one or two of some of these instances, and then I'll go to the next question. So Rhoda, you have the microphone.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. As mentioned, there are so many incidents where we've gone to the communities to do community outreaches, and we've been attacked up front, where like most of the community leaders are like, you brought here your advocacy, but maybe you want to make our wives rebellious and all that. But what we usually do is, in such incidents, that's why we try to leverage on different modes of advocacy. As mentioned, we use posters, we put up posters like around in the community, and in the community, in the town area, and in the village communities we go to. And then besides the posters, we also use the radio. Most people in rural areas are actually fond of their radios. So that's one of the means of advocacy. And then also, when it comes to schools, some parents, most parents actually in rural areas, most rural areas have UPE, Uganda Primary Education, in that, irrespective of the fact that maybe some parents may be so poor, their children have access to school, to primary education, because, the government offers free education. So what we do, we go inside schools, we teach the children, then we give out like pens, we give out books that are branded with logos and have slogans about, human rights, women's rights, health rights. So in such scenarios whereby maybe like a woman is stopped from coming to the outreach, either their child will come from school and come with a book, or they will find a poster maybe at the shop or something. So that's one of the ways that we leverage on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that response, practical responses to how male involvement can be gotten and how the conversations can be passed across even when they are not present. That's a nice one, brother. Before I begin to wrap this up, there's a question for Naidu, and this question has to do with, you mentioned a lot of real practical steps that a person who is a victim of gender-based violence, for instance, rape, can take to ensure that evidence is gathered and things like that. So I want to ask if there is access to some of this information. Is there a link? Is there an access? Because these are some things that people do not know. Even people across the GBV response continuum, they don't have access to some of this information. Is there a way we can get this information so that we can pass it across, especially to the disability community? So I said, let me ask that. And the other one would be, how do we begin to communicate that there's a difference between what justice could mean for a victim and what justice could mean in the legal system. So please go ahead, Nigel.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Important in the sense that understanding example DNA evidence, it's scientific evidence. But we also need to make sure that when we disseminate information, it's in a manner that we all understand, because I might not know the scientific name for DNA or pronounce it correctly. So how do we get that message across? And yes, I will make available to the conference chair, the organizers, information from the Forensic Science Laboratory regarding a brief presentation or notes, so that we can all understand. And I think that's the importance of information sharing. And again, also in terms of the Tutuzela Care Center model, because it's a best practice internationally, and I too would make that information available. But again, I think it's through platforms like this that we share this information. And I think more sessions in terms of training holistically is important, so we get the message across. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, you have. Thank you very much. We'll be looking forward to some of those links so that we could, dive in there and get a lot of information. Because I find that a lot of times when we have conversation, advocates are stuck on a lot of terms and terminologies, and when we get to the grassroots, it's difficult to be able to pass and communicate what we're trying to say to the best way they can understand. And we cannot leave the interventions when it comes to elimination of violence against women and girls with disabilities to just the urban areas or the literate. Everyone must be carried along, and that is why we are focused on uniting. So uniting is not just cutting across the stakeholders, but across the different demographics that you would find a person with disability, as it were. I think my last, before I jump into the next agenda, I know I'm not the panel moderator, but yeah. So this is for Paul. And Paul, we're talking about the issue of mental wellness, and there's something that you spoke to. Thank you so much, Nigel. There's something that you spoke to with respect to holistic approach to health. I'm all for that, because just in case you do not know, anything that has to do with mental has a stigma in the African context. They just accrue it to, once you just hear mental, everybody thinks you're talking about madness, something. They just don't want to jump into that space. So that holistic approach to health is very key. So you talked about the issue of when you're engaging a person and you're bringing psychosocial response to either what happened to the person with respect to violence, how respondents can easily determine if it is based on disability or the experience itself, because a lot of times we've seen where victims of gender-based violence, it's just focused on disability, and there's a takeaway, as it were, from what happened to that person, and there's so much focus on that person's disability. Yes, it's important, but that might not be the case in point at that stage. So how can this be managed so that a victim does not feel even more victimized just because she is a person, or she or he is a person with disability? Paul, if you're there, you could quickly just speak to that.
I'm here.
And we'll have, yes, thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, let's just make sure that, I think this group knows this, but persons with disabilities are more likely to be victims of gender-based violence than those without disabilities or those without outward disabilities. And what are the reasons for that? I don't know the research, but certainly the sense of vulnerability, or the sense that another person perceives them to be vulnerable and therefore chooses to take advantage, causes persons with disabilities to be more commonly to be a higher percentage of persons with disabilities who are victims of gender-based violence than those without. So I don't want anyone to think that I don't think that that's an important factor in considering gender-based violence, but rather that we want to sort out the two differences. And I think simply one is simply putting it that way and focusing on knowing that the two might get blended and may, in the course of a person's life, have been blended, depending on how old the person is, that to try to separate those by at least speaking about the differences and saying, I understand that you're a person with disability, you acquired it however you acquired it, but first, and we want to think about person first language. That is, the person that uses a wheelchair for mobility, not the wheelchair bound person. The person with autism, not the autistic boy. So person first, focusing on the fact that they are a human being first. And therefore, let's talk about your emotional reactions, which are certainly affected by your life experience with disability, just as they're affected by your life experience of being a woman or being a woman in a particular community or country. So putting that out there first, I think, is important. The other thing is to focus on the presenting problems. So tell me what happened to you. Tell me about what it feels like when you say you're feeling depressed or you're worried or you're anxious or you can't sleep. Tell me what happened to you. This doesn't have anything to do with the disability. So you had a nightmare last night. Okay, let's talk about that. What was it like for you? So focusing on the behavior rather than the presentation, the thoughts, the feelings, and the behavior rather than on the disability itself is another way to separate it. I'll pause there.
Oh, thank you very much, Paul. That was very informative. And yes, it's shed a lot of light and clarified, some concerns that I personally had and have seen when it comes to the GBV response. All right, I think we're done with the panel session. We've had great conversations, but they are not going away. They're going to be available during the breakout session. So just, let's get ready for that. Thanks Kachem Melva for handling the session, and thank you Naidu, thank you Rhoda, and thank you for Paul for always being available and bringing a lot of wealth of information from your experiences in this space. Thank you so much. So ladies and gentlemen, and all who have joined us so far, thank you for continuing to be with us. We're not done. We want to do something which has to do with advocacies across Africa. And it's a video clip, so I'd like to sit down, relax, and hear the different stories on different organizations that are carrying out the various advocacy activities in their own spaces as regards women with disabilities, persons with disabilities. But before that, it's important for me to mention that our Brave Story ambassador who couldn't join is going to be putting up a story on LinkedIn. All of the links will be made available by the team in the chat window. So you could go to get information about her Brave Story. She is Ambassador Princess, is unfortunately unable to join. So we're going to be hearing and listening to advocacies across Africa next. And we're going to be getting them from different organizations. The first they're just going to go back to back. That's what's going to happen. So we're going to be receiving from the Mandela Washington Fellowship Disability Inclusion Knowledge Network. We're going to be also receiving from Kachem Young Initiative. We're going to receive from Faye Care Foundation, and we're going to be getting from Tunaweza as well. So over to you, KYI. Let's enjoy the broadcast for the next 15 minutes.
Hi, my name is Samantha Swanda, and I'm the chairperson of the Mandela Washington Fellowship Disability Inclusion Knowledge Network. I'm so proud of the work that Brave Voices has been doing over the years. As the network, we have partnered with Brave Voices for the past 3 years, and this is the 4th year. And I'm proud of the work that they are doing. I come from Zimbabwe, and this year I've got the unique opportunity to participate in the Brave Voices as the chairperson of the MWF, Disability Inclusion Network. And over the years, I've also been participating as a speaker, as a moderator. There is great work that is being done, especially in amplifying the voices of people with disabilities in the discourse of gender-based violence. I see all the time that there's a shared struggle in terms of where we are in policies, where we are in terms of action and implementation of actions towards ending gender-based violence amongst women and girls with disabilities. So I want to commend the great job. In Africa, we say, umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, and we say, I am because you are, which means that we can't be truly free until all people are free. So we have got this shared struggle. And I want to congratulate the Brave Voices for encompassing the whole of Africa, really. We've seen the impact over the years. I myself have learned so much around gender-based violence that I'm implementing in Zimbabwe. We are commemorating the 16 days of activism as well, not only by joining the webinars by Brave Voices, but also by supporting other initiatives. We're part of an Ubuntu GBV COP in Zimbabwe, and this is generally partners that are working together to champion the ending of gender-based violence among girls with disabilities and even non-disabled people. So I want to congratulate everybody who's taking part, and I want to reassure you that the impact is great, from Zimbabwe to South Africa to Cameroon to so many places. The MWF, Disability Inclusion Network itself, has got so many members from more than 10 countries in Africa. So I want to say thank you to Brave Voices for incorporating us. I want to say let's keep going. Let's keep championing this work. It also shouldn't end in just words, but let's take the action. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Princess Emmanuel, Disability Inclusion Ambassador at Kachem Young Initiative Organization. As a person with disability, my experiences has shaped my perception towards disability and has fueled my passion to drive in a positive change in my community. Kachem Young Initiative Disability Inclusion Desk has given a great opportunity, not just to me alone, but to other ambassadors as well, to be an advocate for the rights of persons with disability. And also, it has given us the opportunity to come up with initiatives and programs such as KYI Disability Inclusion Club, which I founded in my school. This was to ensure inclusivity, accessibility, and equality for all students regardless of ability. I've also hosted a conference for International Day of Persons with Disability. This is to create an awareness on inclusion as well as to demystify disability stereotype and to transform mindset towards disability. We are looking forward to an innovative and empowering project for the year 2025, which will be on Disability Talent Display. This is to showcase the talent, strengths, and abilities of persons with disability to the world. At Kachem Young Initiative, we are committed and also to foster inclusivity, accessibility, and equality for all regardless of ability. We believe in diversity and equal opportunity that can enable everyone to thrive.
Hello everyone, so today is another day in our office, and today we want to give out an assistive device. For those who do not know, for persons with disabilities who have a mobility impairment, an assistive device is an extension that allows for independence. And today we have Felicia Ikiriko. You can see her chair. Without somebody assisting her, she cannot move. It is a bad chair. And we, with your support, are giving her this new wheelchair. So this is the unveiling of the wheelchair thanks to partners of Fair Care Foundation. Felicia Ikiriko will receive.
My name is Felicia Ikiriko. I stay in Eagle Island. I'm a hairdresser. So this is Felicia Ikiriko. She lives at Eagle Island in Port Harcourt in Lagos State. It's a whole community by itself. And she is receiving a wheelchair from hospital. Assistive devices are not a luxury for persons with disabilities. We actually need them to be able to go about our activities of daily living. And so it's our pleasure to be able to provide this through our partners. Let's watch as she transfers to her new chair. So you can see that there's a world of difference. Yeah, the other one was there's no way a person can balance and be comfortable in that width of seat, you know. And then the footrest. So this is a chair that is almost a hazard because she could fall easily and cause more injury. So we're very grateful to be able to do this for her. And we are asking that if you know and have the ability to give mobility device, whether it's crutches, elbow, underarm, or wheelchair, please do so. At Fair Care Foundation, we ensure that those who need it.
I want to really appreciate this opportunity to appreciate Fair Care Foundation and every other people that works there and made it possible for me to have this wheelchair, because I've really suffered a lot because of this wheelchair. Because of the wheelchair, I don't go to my business. I'm always indoors. I really want to show my appreciation to Fair Care Foundation. I say thank you.
So in Fair Care is one of the things we do. Please join us whenever you have any of this accessibility device so that we can help other persons and these needs. Thank you.
Oh, hi. Okay, yeah, hi. So, those were some, thank you, Paul. I see your claps. Thank you for those who are sending emojis. So, I'm thinking, I thought we were going to get one more from the other group. Are we getting more? If not, then we'll be receiving the brief story of a young lady. And I'll quickly introduce her and then they'll play. She has a pre-recorded video. She lives in rural Uganda, so she was not able to connect, of course, and she was able to record her story. So by way of introduction, we're going to be getting a brief story from a young lady. Her name is Jennifer Amanyala. She's a primary school teacher at Iganga district in Uganda, and it's a rural community. So for ease of telling her story, we have a pre-recorded version. So please listen to this brave story from a brave young lady. Over to you, KYI.
Hi everyone, I'm Amanyala Jennifer. I'm from Uganda. I'm a young woman living with a physical disability. Yes, being with a disability is a journey, and it has not been easy for me with being with a disability. But we have the challenges that we face. I, the person with a disability, have a challenge of discrimination. People discriminate me. They don't allow me to be together with them. They don't allow me to move together with them, all combined in their groups. And also, I have had a problem of child labor when I was staying with my parents. They could make me work a lot. They could make me wash clothes, go for water, dig, do all sorts of every work. And remember, they never liked me just because of the disability. So I had no right to decide. I had no right to do to talk anything out on my anything good on my side. And also even not being taken to school and the school fees. I was in the school, but in a very long journey school, but I could just foot and go. No lunch paid there, nothing could be paid there, but I could just go and starve and stay just to get education. And also, they never liked me to be at school just because they thought that a person with a disability doesn't need to go to school, doesn't need to achieve education, but also it helped me. But also to realize the disability, I came to know the disability when I was in primary 5. That's when I came to know that I have the disability, because that's when my friends, my colleagues at school, the people could ask me when I got the disability and why do I have the disability. They would tell me, was it that you got an accident? Were you cut? Were you beaten? Were you cursed? And they would ask me very many questions that I could not reply to them. But all in all, when I grew up and I went with my education, but when I reached after my senior 4, I went for the course, I branched, I went for the ECD. When I went for the nursery teaching, and I went for the teaching course. When I reached there, when at that very first year, I got pregnant. But after getting the pregnancy, they denied me and they told me you should pay your own school fees, you should take care of yourself and the pregnancy, although if not, you go to the man's place, take care of you. But I struggled and struggled during the pregnancy. They would speak to me bad words, they tell me, they abuse me, they speak any word, but I could just keep quiet. But after giving birth, I managed to go and get some small job, and I paid the fees balance. I went for the final exams and I did the final exams to get a certificate for teaching. And also, I began now teaching. When I was teaching, I stayed with my son. I left the dad and I left our home. I went and I rented. I got the house and I'm renting now. I'm paying the rent myself. And also, it was 2022 when Tunaweza came in. Tunaweza Foundation came in implementing the activity for We Lead. They came in implementing the We Lead activities, teaching people about the sexual and reproductive health rights for persons with disabilities. So they came into the district, that is in the district, Tororo district in Uganda. They went to the district. They signed the memorandum of understanding. They sent them to the sub-county. So in the sub-county, we were chosen 15 girls, and they took us for the training for persons with disabilities. They were trained, we were counseled, and that is when we came to accept ourselves. And I said, yes, I have the disability. This is how I am, and I will never change, and this is how it will be forever, because it is not that I'll go to the hospital and get any surgery or what. No. And also the Tunaweza came in with community meetings, and the community meeting involved the religious leaders, land leaders, because some of the religious leaders could say that one is a curse. If you have a child with a disability, that one is a curse. And they put them in the meetings, so they had the knowledge. They trained them. Everybody who could come to the sub-county for the meeting, they were trained.
What a story. We really thank Jennifer for telling us her story, for telling us her experiences. She's just one of the few who was able to get back on her feet in spite of facing the violence that she faced, psychological, physical, in the space in her community. Well, thank you, Jennifer Amanyala, for sharing with us. Thank you very much. I'm sure I still have people with me in this conversation, in this conference. In the course of the conversation, we heard from Dr. Chima Edoga, an eye surgeon based in Enugu, Nigeria, and a fan of KYI. And Dr. Chima did mention that they receive quite a number of patients with eye trauma who are victims of gender-based violence. So this still speaks to how specific it could be when it comes to trauma that gender-based violence victims experience, and how everyone must indeed unite in the elimination of violence against women with disabilities. Thank you, Dr. Chima Edoga, for joining us. Remember, we said we have people participating in the American Corner in Enugu. So we're glad to have them there. And of course, you who is joining us virtually on the Zoom platform. So we started the conversation as early as 12 noon here, West African time. And depending on where you are, it may still be morning, it may still be afternoon, it may still be evening. And we really like to hear your thoughts on the conversations so far. So remember that wherever you are, you can still tell us what you are doing in your own space in the chat box, and we will kindly read it out like we have just done for Dr. Chima Edoga. I'm still Freki Andrew Essien of Faker Foundation, and we are with Kachem on this Brave Voices to ensure that we continue to have the relevant conversations when it comes to elimination of violence against women and girls with disabilities, or persons with disabilities, as it were. Our next item on the agenda is a breakout session where we go into breakout rooms and have detailed conversations, as it were, in different areas. And it will be important for me to tell you the different rooms that we have. We're going to be having 4 rooms during the breakout session. There you have a closer space where you can interact, ask questions. The panelists will be in the different rooms as well as others joining. So you want to be able to participate in all the rooms, have great conversations, and have deep conversations. The first room, room 1, is going to be focusing on engaging participants on inclusive. Hold on. Okay. The first room will be focused on engaging participants on inclusive strategies for community engagement and grassroots advocacy. I'm sure you remember that a bit of that was touched during the panel discussion, so this is going deeper. And those will be present in that room. Manning that room are Nkechinyere Melva Uguru. We've read her profile, but just in case you're just joining, she is the founder of Kachem Young Initiative, the conveners of the Brave Voices Conference. We're going to have in that room as well Samantha Sibanda, who you heard from the Mandela Washington Fellowship Disability Inclusive Knowledge Network. So she is a human rights advocate from Zimbabwe and the chairperson of the MWF Disability Inclusion Knowledge Network. And she's going to be joining Melva and other participants in room 1 to direct and have deep conversations on inclusive strategies for community engagement and grassroots advocacy. The second room is going to be manned by Paul Sachs. You heard him during the panel conversation, and the focus is engaging justice strategies to ensure mental wellness and recovery of victims. So deeper conversations on the topic we had started during the panel discussions. The third room is going to be going to have Omashani and Rhoda. and they're going to be engaging participants on strategic advocacy, ensuring recovery and inclusive access to justice. Strategic advocacy, ensuring recovery and inclusive access to justice. That's going to be manned by Omashani and Rhoda. And the fourth room is on assistive technology. Assistive technology, supported employment, and direct support services that ensure independent and reduced susceptibility to abuse. Whether we like it or not, codependency is one way that we have perpetrators of abuse met abuse to victims of violence. And assistive technology, supported employment, direct support services are a great preventive measure against gender-based violence. And for that group, oh yeah, so I didn't read the other people's profiles because we had read them earlier, but for this group, we're going to be having Zuko Mandlakazi. Zuko is a multi-award winning social innovator dedicated to enhancing human inclusivity and connectedness through assistive technology, also the founder of Sensor. Also in that group, we're going to be having Tom. Tom has been with us from the beginning. Tom Defayette is a certified employment specialist and disability advocate, focusing on inclusive education, employment, vocational training, and independent living. He has volunteered across Africa and led gender-based violence prevention initiatives in Botswana. So these are the 4 breakout rooms, 4 deep sessions with great leads. Of course, your voice must be heard in your groups. So the tech team, I believe that when you were signing up for the conference, you indicated where you would like to join. So you're going to be taken straight to your breakout rooms. Please make sure your voice is heard, have the great conversations. One of the things that we may likely do if we have enough time would be that one person from each of the groups would do brief 2-minute summaries of what some of the conversations that they had in their breakout rooms, very brief. That'll be before the repertoire comes to give us more insight. So would like that to happen. So when you go into your breakout rooms, appoint someone to just take notes so that in a minute, the person can quickly do the needful. So the breakout rooms are available for joining. Please join a breakout room. Let's have the right conversations. Let's have the deep conversations. Thanks, everyone. See you back in 15 minutes. Thank you. Please join the room.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Ngozi. Hello, Samantha.
Hello.
Can we have your video on?
I'm trying to do that just a moment.
You're muted. Hey.
Okay. Hello.
Hello, Samantha. Are you with us?
Maybe not. Okay.
I'm not sure if she can hear.
Someone is joining. Is that she called?
But Sam is here already. Okay, anyways, you joined because you love rural advocacy. And I think your question, Ngozi, is actually directed at this particular room. So can you ask it again so that we'll discuss it? Yeah.
So I don't know if I need to ask the question again or probably just start from the point where she answered. So the thing is, from the answer, I was just wondering, because it seems to me like leveraging other means to promote their advocacy is like taking an avoidance mechanism away from the chauvinism of the men here. For example, it's like not addressing the issue, the obstacle to the advocacy. And I think that may create more suspicion or probably increase the chauvinistic tendency towards like even promoting to violence, which is something we want to avoid. So I was wondering if there are social mechanisms or, that can be employed to build in inclusive strategies to first address the chauvinism and bring the men in before the advocacy in such a way that they can be part of the advocacy outreach. And because the GBV, as we're talking about, is not just for women, even though the higher number is in women. But if the men know their wives' right, because gender-based violence doesn't always come from the spouses, it can come from external to the wife. And if the man knows the rights of the wife, he will be able to support her and get justice as well. So I was wondering if there are social skills or social mechanisms that can be used to include in the advocacy outreach to address chauvinism and bring the men into this. Perhaps I feel like having that approach can make it more inclusive and also more acceptable by the communities.
I absolutely agree. So I'm going to respond based on what KYI has done, especially in rural communities where you often or mostly find chauvinism, patriarchy and all. So in rural communities, most of the time as well, especially, let me just use the example of the kind of rural communities we work in. They have cultures that foster or keep perpetuating female subjugation. Now, these are the cultures that also, of course, keep exacerbating the chauvinism, the patriarchy, and all of these things. Now, the experience that we had when we started Catch and Young Initiative and focused it only on women was the telltales of men claiming, oh, you want to make my wife and my daughters feminists. You are for women emancipation, we don't want you. And then one thing we noticed is that there needs to be a way for these men to understand that inclusion is not against them. And also to understand inclusion of both persons with disability and women themselves, that it's not against them. If anything, the chauvinism is what is actually causing the problems. That's what is even putting down development and all of those things. So what we did was to create programs that included men, but first of all, we had something we call legal competency trainings. Now, these legal competency trainings was targeted at the community leadership, whereby the community leaders are made to understand the law. But just like we talked about, we have to be very careful about using legal terms and focusing it on law, because some of them are illiterates in terms of learning, formal education and all. So we tailor it to their own peculiarities, use words that they understand, translate or use like activities that they can relate to help them understand the operating constitution or operating laws, especially the VAP law, and also that they understand where their cultures are repugnant to these laws and what the law says about such repugnancies. Then when they come to the understanding, we want to first of all rule out ignorance. Then we come to help them understand what the community and they themselves stand to gain where inclusion thrives. Because it's a selfish world. So oftentimes everybody wants to know what is in on it for me. So if this happens, because they think that there's something they stand to gain as men when they subdue their women. But when you help them understand that they actually stand nothing to gain, but rather stand to lose a lot more in terms of economic development, in terms of social development, and in terms of, even education for women. The powerful things that could happen if a daughter or a woman is educated, or if a person with disability is educated. Some of the people that have helped to put together Brave Voices in terms of technical support and everything are persons with disability. Now imagine if they were not given the opportunity to be able to be learned enough to do that. We have a lot of persons with disability doing amazing things. Now we have inclusion ambassadors, disability inclusion ambassadors, who are persons with disabilities in these communities doing amazing things, and then the community members can see it. So while we were helping them understand the importance of inclusion for them as individuals and generally as a community, we were also modeling it for them. We wanted them to see. So we had to recruit these disability inclusion ambassadors from within the communities, create awareness within the communities. And we also didn't go adversarial on them. So we went there helping them understand that, oh, we know, because well, generally, there's a presumption that no parent would naturally just hate their child. So we know that sometimes they are ignorant of what they can do with this child that has a disability. So we go there and offer the support that that person with disability needs within the family. And then the family wants to, they love it. Now we have a lot of families who want to learn sign language so that they are able to communicate with their family members with disability and all. And we now have communities. In fact, we have one of the communities, the poor community, that have given us a space, a land to build a center on and have our sign language interpreters come there to teach sign language. And they are willing to learn, including the community leaders. And the reception was awesome. So I think that at the point of community entry, it is important to engage both the men, the women, every sector, every aspect of the community that forms stakeholdership. And then even the political leaders, because one of the things that we've also found is if you do not engage one side or you forget to engage one side, they will form a bond against you to fight you that, oh, these ones are not for us. So because they are rural people and their understandings are different. So we also have to, advocates have to come down from their high horses, from your level of understanding, and then you have to understand from their own perspective as well, so that you see where you can strike a balance. And most of it that has worked is stemming from the fact that you have to make them own the projects. So when you come up with initiatives, you have to ensure that the community members are part of the planning, they are part of the process, and that they are part of the execution. In fact, that they take the lead as well. So we've had, in fact, in our communities, it is the community leaders who reach out to us and say, oh, we found a child with cerebral palsy. What can we do? Which hospital can you recommend, or which school can you recommend? Which is a whole lot of progress that we've made. And I think that we were able to get it right at community entry, in being inclusive of men, because men are the perpetrators, the community leaders are the perpetrators. So if you catch the perpetrators young, then you're able to also begin your process of eliminating the issue.
Yeah.
So yes.
And they will become the agents of addressing the issue too.
Yes. Sam, are you with us?
Thank you very much. I think that is really very, very detailed. I mean, I think it would be more sustainable to take this approach instead of, for example, taking other means to push in the advocacy, knowing that some people are resisting. It kind of creates more room for misunderstanding, and that would not be sustainable. At the end, the people you're teaching may end up turning against their spouses, and then also kind of confirming the suspicion. Because the way you put in the advocacy is also the way they take it in. When they feel like you're trying not to make the other person know about it, they think that you're teaching them a weapon they can use to fight the perpetrators. So they will now turn against the perpetrators and start to fight them by themselves, which is not the goal of the whole advocacy. So I actually think this is a good approach that needs to be adopted for sustainability. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sam, are you here? Sam, if you can unmute yourself so that we know that you are here. So if we have any further questions, or you can carry on the discussion while I visit the other breakout rooms as well. Yeah, Sam is here. Can you unmute yourself to join the conversation so I hand over the room to you and visit the other rooms? Okay, but you, if you have any more further questions that is tugging in your heart about how we engage at the grassroots level, or how you can, what you can adopt from how we engage, please shoot. You can also visit other rooms because I'm going to visit another room right now.
How do we change rooms if we want?
So when you go to, can you see the breakout room sign on your screen?
What does it look like? Sorry.
Okay, so when you are on your screen,
Yeah.
you go down to the menu bar, you see the breakout room. You click on it to see several rooms.
Okay.
And then you click on join,
Okay.
the room that you wish to join.
Right, I could see it now. Thank you.
Hello, dear. Excuse my language. We were just talking about making connections with people and how to build that. And then I was just asking the oh, thank you. Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Chukwuemeka and I were talking about how to make connections with people because sometimes it's hard to know how to treat people as they are, and we talked about ways to get people to be talking about things that are important to them, and then also sharing things about themselves. So you want to be careful about, it's different in the United States than it is in Nigeria, but you want to be careful about how much self-disclosure. Sometimes people don't want to know too much about you, but sometimes if I tell something about something, it's usually a personal story. So given that, and we're talking about disabilities, I will say my youngest brother was born with a cleft palate, and he had a lot of surgeries and still has quite a good amount of, what should I call it, facial and dental issues going on. And so that was always a sensitive subject in our family. And so that's my youngest experience with disabilities. I see we have other people who are joining, so I'm happy to hear anybody who would like to comment or question on anything that they'd like to talk about.
I'd like to comment on something because, sometimes too, the advocates themselves need a lot of recovery to do, a lot of therapy. So just to share something, I think it was just on Friday or Saturday or thereabouts, learned about the young girl that I told her story, Chinonso. And to say that that did not tug on me would be a lie. As an advocate, some of the things that you see in the field, it lives with you. It could never be measured with the experience of the person who lives it, but then you also still have your own experience from your own perspective that you have to live with. So one of the things that most advocates don't do is engage therapy, which I think is very important, which I think is very key, because it's also going to help you heal enough to be able to support another person, a victim as well. So sometimes you find advocates who have been traumatized in their own way, and then they are taking out some of these stored up aggressions or traumas on the victims who themselves are living the experience. And also, so that's also another aspect that is really important to me. Yes.
No, I think that's a very good point, Melva, and I think that let me try to reframe it. If you find yourself very emotionally affected by working with somebody who has had some type of trauma or some type of extreme emotional distress, that just means you're a sensitive person. It's not bad. I would be more worried about you if you were able to talk to people who had terrible trauma and you weren't affected at all. I'd start to wonder, would you bleed if I pricked you? So I think it's important that we recognize that when you have an emotional reaction to somebody or to somebody's circumstance, or when you see something terrible that happens in your community, even if it's not directly affecting you, it shows your sensitivity. And that's a good thing, but we have to be able to protect ourselves and be able to channel our sensitivity in order to help people. And again, not take out our own problems on them. Another term that psychologists use for that is identification. And you can see that in literature that is, I feel as if it's happening to me. I identify so much with that person's experience. I feel as if I went through what they went through, even though I didn't. So that's also a positive thing, to be able to identify with another person, but it also is something that needs to be recognized and managed. I'll pause there.
Of course.
Welcome your comments.
Thank you so much. I would move to another room to view.
Okay, nice to see you. Okay. Anybody else who's here in the room that wants to comment or has another question, I'm happy to talk to you further about anything that is coming to mind.
Yeah, I have a question, sir.
Yes, please.
All right. My name is Princess Manuel.
Our work at so I often visit organizations, and then I would speak about accessibility, diversity, inclusion, and then people would be so shocked about the value of that. You know, I mean, like about a month ago, I was engaging this other group of people, advertising company, you know, and some of their customers are people like it's a brand, it's a bakery. And I'm like, I mean, like you look at the bakery, people within the deaf community, they consume bread, but have we ever have a moment, even if it's just a 30-second clip, where bread is advertised in a manner that's inclusive or embracing to the people within the deaf community? And then the people are like, what? Like they've never thought of these things, you know? So yeah, awareness is a big part of it. I've seen it that a lot of people, they just say, you know, abled person, and then everything around them, because they are abled people, is just that, you know. So if someone does not have a reality of having someone who is deaf in their family, chances are they're not going to accommodate a person who is deaf in anything they will ever do, unless somebody who's working in that space bring that reality to such people. So I've seen these to work a bit. Even when I visit the buildings, I often look outside and then I would see the ramps for wheelchair. And then I'd be concerned and I'd raise other things. What about this other person who may have a different need when it comes to assistive technology? And then people like, oh, we never thought of that, those kind of things. So a lot of times we don't even need a big campaign, you know, it's just in a conversation, engaging people online, you know. But yeah, these are some of the things I often tend to do in my small contribution, or in my when I have a bit of time and I'm engaging such organization, to inform them as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope I'm not joining late. I have a question for you, Tom. So it's really interesting what you do in terms of service provision to assist persons with disability without necessarily, like when we say they should get a job, and when we say, oh, they should do this, there's a lot of shoulds that we often say in our part of the world. But there's really I haven't heard of any organization, even if it's a private organization, that is willing to assist in providing services and ensuring that these services are accessible to them. For example, employment, you know, like what you do. And I think that we have a lot of ministries in, for instance, Nigeria, and I think it probably plays the same, I think it's probably the same with most other African countries. We have a lot of portfolios, we have a lot of structures. Structure is never the problem, but implementation of the goals of these structures are often the problem, you know. So I'm also happy that Barrister Lillian Evuire is here as well. I think she's mostly the reason I'm asking this question, because she works with the government in Nigeria as well. So how do you think, how do you advise that we begin something like what you do in our various spheres?
Mela, this question's for me. You mentioned also Lillian.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I believe we probably only have about 90 seconds to answer that. Wow. The evolution of the disability movement, I like to say that the United States may be a little more ahead than other countries, and there's some reasons for that. It isn't. I suspect that other countries are following in some of our footsteps. One of them being the term supportive. That's a common term here in the United States. We have supportive housing, we have supported employment, we have supportive, meaningful activities. Basically, what this means is that there's a paid person, or in some cases, volunteers that are available to persons with disabilities to assist them to participate in their community, either in an employment, even in healthcare, for example. If someone's having trouble advocating for themselves due to an illness, there are individuals that can coach them and even go with them to their appointments. This poses some issues as well, because sometimes we offer these services, but when the person wants them, they're not available. So I always am cautious of the concept of do no harm, meaning that we offer AT to individuals, for example, but when it comes down to it, we put a lot of barriers into actually assessing it. So, so basically what I'm saying is when someone is offered a service, we have to make sure they get it in a timely manner as well. So supportive is a big key here for those people who need an advocate or a friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'll move.
I think we're done.
I think they'll take us out soon.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I would have loved to add something, just based on your question, Melva, and yeah, I would have liked to add something on that. Something that I do a lot in South Africa, in the spaces that I move to, you know, where I just encourage companies, look, with the product that you produce and sell to the people, let the people, your employees, let them reflect to the people that consume these products. So there are persons with disabilities that eat your bread. Have an employee with a disability, because there are people that eat your bread, you know, persons with disabilities eating your bread. So have an employee like that, you know, have a diversity that, you know, demonstrate the consumption of your goods and services in the marketplace. You know, so that's what I like to say. That's what I often encourage companies to do. Well, there are other things like in South Africa where they get BEE points, government points, tax brackets for having employees with disabilities, you know, but at the core, I always encourage them, let your workforce have a reflection of your customers.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely wonderful. Let your business reflect your consumers. Yes, that's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I think we are about to go to the main. With the main, we have not nominated the person that can help us and share and reflect on the conversation that we have for 2 minutes. Tom, would you mind doing that honor for us on our behalf, sharing for 2 minutes some of the things that we may have looked into in our
Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back from our breakout rooms. For those that joined, welcome back. So one of the things we said before we went into the breakout session was that we would ask representatives that have been chosen, by the breakout rooms to do 1 to 2 minutes to just discuss a few things that they did in their groups before we take the summary and key insights. So from the general, but I just want to hear from those who participated. So room one, do we have a representative from room one? You can unmute yourself and
Ngozi, Ngozi, please unmute yourself and share from what we learned in room one.
Okay, so Ngozi, go ahead. Remember, you have 1 to 2 minutes, so keep it simple. Short.
Hello, everyone. So we were talking about inclusive strategies to ensure inclusive strategies for community engagement and grassroots advocacy programs. So we kind of extended the question that we were discussing on how to create inclusive strategies to involve men in the advocacy outreach. So the summary of what we discussed is that it's important to bring men in the advocacy, because when they are brought in and they are part of the advocacy team in planning and executing the advocacy outreach, it becomes more sustainable. So, and from what Melva shared, which is an approach that KYI uses, she mentioned that when they went for such outreach, they had to develop a training session for the men, legal competency training, which included men and leaders of the community. So when they brought them in, they trained them on these issues first. And those men now were part of the people that are now, carrying out the outreach and teaching the women, helping to teach the rights to the women. And what it means is that for example, in disability, the parents usually are ignorant of how to support the child. And then it turns out to look like they're discriminating against the child. But because they have been trained, they usually are the ones that will be calling the KYI team, that they have a child that has maybe a cerebral palsy, please, which hospital can we take them to? And this is the result of the training which has been done, carrying the men along. So we're talking about the fact that including men will make the advocacy outreach more sustainable.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much, Ngozi, for great representation in Room 1, talking about not just community, but taking it down to male involvement, as it was a question that came up very strongly during the panel session. So let's have the representative of Room 2. Room 2, engaging justice strategies that ensure mental wellness and recovery of victims. Paul, who is your representative? Please unmute your mic and speak. Rep. Remember, 1 to 2 minutes.
Mine was not justice. You mean mental health?
Okay, go ahead.
Mental health.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Actually, we had a rotating group of people, so I'm going to just leave it to see if I see several of them are on here. I don't know if Chukwuemeka or Success Nation would like to say a few words, or Princess.
Okay, so who is coming? Success, Chukwuemeka, or Princess? One of you, just go ahead, please, quickly. Let's do this.
Okay. Thank you. In Room 2, we actually had much conversations that actually focused on the mental health and trying to be sure to not barge into, I know because of the initial conversations, there is always that something came up on, maybe for someone who is actually physically challenged, the boundaries, right? People have their boundaries and the rights you have either to encroach into people's boundaries. A couple of questions came in trying to deal with mental health as a leader in an organization, and also how to get people talk to you, and also how to express yourself. So one beautiful takeaway I got from our conversations is that first, there is limit to what you say. And secondly, in trying to get conversations with people and get to know them, maybe what happened to them, and possibly offer help. Always feel free and comfortable to ask that question, how can I help you? Not necessarily trying to tell them what you want to do for them, but get to be on their own side, hear their own side of the story, and then find out what they want from your own end. And that would possibly keep the information that needs to be kept, and as well offer the need and the help that they want to get from you. And by so doing, you would also be able to, keep the mental health space. And then lastly, the sense of advocates also ensuring that they get mental support. I think Dr. Paul was actually able to tell us that if you as an advocate, and then you hear a whole lot of stories about persons, and then you don't feel impacted by these things, he would possibly be concerned about you. So yes, in the space of the social workspace, hearing a couple of stories may at certain points start weighing down on an advocate or someone in the social workspace, and it's always okay to also seek for help and rehabilitation on your own side. I think, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chukwuemeka, for your contributions, for the discussions in Room 2. Great conversation. And remember, as an advocate, you must also check your mental wellness, because you are also impacted, whether you know it or not, on the stories that you hear, the victims, and all that happens in that space. So be careful of your mental health, because you may also start projecting if you do not take care of your mental health. And just to reiterate again, because there's something that happens quite a bit in our space, do not forget that physically challenged persons are just one cluster of persons with disabilities, and we're focused on all clusters of disability, whether sensory, whether learning, whether physical, or any type. All right, so psychosocial. Okay, so Room 3. Do we have a representative? The lead discussants were Mashani and Rhoda, but do we have a participant who would represent the group to present in 2 minutes what you talked about? Please, who's speaking? Unmute and go ahead.
Thank you, Friki. Sadly, very sadly, we did not have any participants. We had Benin that came in on the last, but I suppose she couldn't hear us. So unfortunately, we have no report back. Thank you.
Okay, that's all. Let me see, what did they talk about? strategic. So do you want to say one thing, I guess?
Yes, I think just between Rhoda and myself, we engaged a little bit, and then we'll give ourselves just 1 minute. We spoke about the TCC model and that being a best practice, but we also spoke about the good work that Rhoda is doing in terms of public awareness, and more importantly, addressing rural areas, the need in rural areas. We spoke previously, as well as at the pre-conference, around a booklet for traditional leaders, and making that book available to be translated in different languages as a guide to traditional leaders and how they address GBV. We spoke about albinism and the effects of albinism, and the manner in which rural communities view albinism and the myths associated there too. We also spoke about female genital mutilation. But again, all of these spoke to areas around creating awareness, training, as well as breaking those boundaries, and talking about issues or areas that people don't want to talk to, but in a manner that people will appreciate and understand. Thank you, Friki.
Thank
Rhoda,
you so much.
Sorry,
Rhoda,
Rhoda, I'm not sure if I've covered everything.
Yes, I'm sure you have. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you so much, Rhoda, for the great conversations. And we look forward to those resources so that, they can be translated in the context of different countries as well as different cultures. Awesome. So, room 4, assistive technology, supported, all of that. So, Tom, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Although our focus of our group was assistive technology, we mostly spoke about diversity and accessibility. One of our participants wanted to know how to improve their organization's diversity to be inclusive of persons with disabilities. We recommended they reach out to their local organization of persons with disabilities or disabled persons organization. Normally within a community, you will find an umbrella organization founded and operated by persons with disabilities. Those organizations have a large capacity for advocacy and inclusiveness, and they'll more than likely be very happy to visit your organizations to talk to you. Another participant talked about campaigns to improve accessibility and compliance with laws. Certainly, those are very important. And a member of our group also said that campaigns can be very small. It can be a one-person campaign simply by being out in the community, a person with disability being out in the community or talking to their family, friends, neighbors about disability in general and ways to make their community more inclusive. We talked about the lived experience, being a person with disabilities or even accessing the components of a lived experience by having a family member that may have a disability and your support with that family member. That increases your sensitivity and heightened awareness, and as such, you become a stronger advocate. And we talked about supportive employment, and basically what that means is that an individual is assigned to assist a person seeking and maintaining employment, and this power of peer advocacy that goes along with that to keep that person in the workforce. Thank you.
Wow, great conversations, but such little time to be able to talk about more, because this is really key, that issue of diversity, it's really key because even within the disability community, we find that there is, yes, it's okay to want to focus on the sector, but it's quite important that in the GBV response that you kind of have an idea of how that person's disability may interact with their experience and how they can relate. So thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for driving the conversation in your group. Thank you. And I just to mention that Paul had dropped some link in the group with respect to albinism and human rights. So you may want to get that downloadable resource. And many resources will be posted soon. So I'm expecting some links from Rhoda, from Omashini, and from KYI, downloadable resources. I'll also check if I can post one or two, especially with respect to the survey that we did in FACARE, FACARE with respect to COVID-19. All right, so great day, great conference. We're slowly winding down. And this is where I hand over to the rapporteurs, Kemi, specifically to just do a brief insight into some of the conversations that we've had so far. So, Kemi, you're going to want to take over at this point. Please keep it brief. The advocates in the rooms have helped a lot. So Kemi, our rapporteur, is going to do a summary on key insights from parallel sessions as well as the panel discussions. So Kemi, over to you. If you can do this in 10 minutes, I'll be grateful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you so far for your participation. And I will just give a brief summary of most of the activities that were done today. And going forward, we'll also have a report that we'll share with everyone to have a better understanding and a better report of the whole event. So we had the event started by Melva. She gave us a brief introduction about what the whole conference is and also what KYI is all about. The conference theme is focused on uniting to prevent violence against women and girls with disabilities. And Melva shared a story about Nonso, where she used the story to highlight systemic negligence, and she called for inclusions and advocacy, linking it to other women and girls with disabilities. She also talked about some of the objectives of KYI and Brave Voices, which is empowerment, awareness, mental awareness, and prevention of gender-based violence cases. And after that, we went ahead to have a special section by Amanda. Just a second. We also had a special address section by Amanda, who is the Deputy Public Affairs Officer, U.S. Consulate in Lagos, Nigeria. She thanked everyone for having her, and she acknowledged the KYI team. She talked about how Melva was a member of the Mandela Young Initiative and how that also helped with collaborations and the great work that is being done with the Kashim Young Initiative. She talked about the role of government and stakeholders coming together in training young ones. She talked about how human rights is important in the advocacy for people with disabilities and how all of this comes together to help. She talked also about intersectoral collaborations to help address gender-based violence within the disabled community. After that, we had a panel discussion section that was held by, that was coordinated by Melva. And in the panel discussion sections, we had Rhoda, and we had Nadia, and we had Dr. Paul. And the discussions were, we had several questions for each of them. And for Rhoda, we had questions that were around how to ensure women with disabilities in rural areas understand their legal rights and can access justice after experiencing gender-based violence, and what strategies have been found to be effective in balancing legal advocacy with emotional recoveries for patients. And she highlighted a few points like the idea is to ensure that no one is left behind in knowing their rights. And she said it's important to understand that women in these rural areas are mostly illiterate, they are marginalized, and they have limited ability to move around. So the idea is that they try to go back to the community to do outreaches in schools and home to meet both exposed and unexposed girls. They use creative means to help community understand the message, e.g. the use of drama groups, making posters with images in their local languages, slogans, talk shows, and other methods just to pass across these messages and make them understand. And in terms of the strategies, she talked about mediation. She talked about follow-up to ensure that these people comply when there are court cases and all of that, and to make sure that the victims are comfortable, and also to link them with right service providers for further support. And the other section we had with Nadia, the questions were what steps are taken within the South African justice system to ensure cases involving women with disabilities are handled sensitively and effectively? And based on her experience, what does she advise the pastoral processes to adapt to better support to recovery of victims with disability? And she talked about how mental health cases, she talked about how mental health is not just about the mental space, but also physical. And she talked about how the legal system has things put in place, such as training on social context. They have a one-step crisis rape center where they take the victim through the system and ensure that their vitals are taken, statements are taken, they are giving caregivers, and they're also protected. She also talked about the court proceedings that are attuned with the needs of the victims, accommodating victims with disabilities and providing what they need. And lastly, we had Dr. Paul, who was asked about how mental health the role it plays in helping survivors with disability rebuild their life after experiencing gender-based violence, and how community and system work together to provide justice and long-term emotional recoveries for patients. And he talked about the role of mental health, how it plays a big role in supporting gender-based violence, and talked about how mental health is total health, not just mental. That he also talked about change environment and also ensuring that victims understand boundaries, so they recognize and they advocate for these boundaries. He also talked about trauma-informed system of care, training of everyone involved so that they know what to do when there's a case. He talked about being sensitive and aware, sensitivity and awareness for secondary trauma, know that people are able to reflect on who they are and their vulnerabilities. He also talked about the role of the general community, which is coming together to help and realizing that we all can play a role in all of this. And after that, we had the story, the Brave Voice story by Jennifer, we had the story by Jennifer where she shared how she went through a lot of discrimination and people who were trying to exclude her because of her disability, and how she was able to push through all of this at the end of the day. Then we went ahead to have the breakout sections, which we just talked about now. Thank you. That's all.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kemi. Very, very nice. Oh, you're too much. Thank you, Kemi. Thank you for that awesome summary of all we have done in the course of the day. Wow, fantastic. So guys, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone on this cruise, we are slowly descending. If I was a pilot, that's what I would say. We're slowly descending to our final destination. In the next 10 minutes, this will be a wrap, if not less. So we've come to the point in time where I'm going to be handing over to Samantha to award the Brave Voices of 2024 certificates for for Brave Voices. So over to you, Samantha. I know you know what to do, the chairperson of Mandela Washington Fellowship, Disability, Knowledge and Inclusion and Knowledge Network. So go ahead, please. You have just 5 minutes to do this. And after that, Melva, just jump in immediately and do your appreciations, and I'll come back. Thanks.
I can't seem to see Samantha, but if she's not here, I think I'll just jump in as well.
All right, so go ahead and do both.
Yes, so our brave voices, as is cultural with us, we often award our brave voices each year. And one of the things that resonates with every single brave voice, one of the characteristics of being a brave voice is being brave against all odds and all. The first brave voice, Princess, you would still hear her story. She would share with us live on LinkedIn, and we're going to post it on all of our platforms as well, so that we will ensure you do not miss any part of our story, because it's an amazing story that should be heard. And amidst the troubles of trying to join us, she still kept on and still joined, which is the characteristics of a brave voice, of being brave. She stayed resilient to ensure that she joined in and actually participated. And then amidst the connectivity issues and being in rural Uganda, in Iganga district, the amazing Jennifer was able to join us by pre-recording her video. She didn't want to miss any aspect of it, because one of the things that they both have learned is to ensure that their voices are heard. And they have also learned to push through, to be resilient about it, and to ensure to keep at it until their voices are heard. And they deserve this award. As I speak, they are already receiving their awards in their emails. And I think we're going to clap for them for that. They are amazing, brave voices, and we named them Brave Voices for 2024. Jennifer Amanyala and Princess Emmanuel. Congratulations on being awarded Brave Voices 2024. You deserve it, and continue to do the amazing work that you do in your communities. Continue to advocate for women and girls with disabilities, and continue to drive the change as you're driving change. Now that's done, I will jump in to appreciate everyone who joined in. I am very certain that my goals were met, my expectations were met. I hope yours was met, and we're going to be putting out a lot of resources like the communiques, the conference reports, and we're also going to be reaching out to our speakers, our guests, to share some of their resources as well, so that we can make available to advocacy proponents everything that we can do to ensure that we go beyond just speaking, just talking, to ensuring that we make resources available to support advocacies across rural communities, across urban areas, and even at the global level as well, to ensure that everyone who should hear is able to hear, but also ensuring that advocates themselves are able to also identify what best practices is, and to also learn from your work, your researches, your experiences as advocates and as experts through your written work, so that we can publish for them to assess. These are also part of uniting in our various ways to ensure that we eliminate gender-based violence. Thank you, and thank you again for joining as a participant, and thank you for staying through, because we have exceeded our time by 24 minutes, and you're here. That shows that this is really important to you. Thank you, everyone, and back to you, Freki.
Awesome. So thank you very much for participating in Brave Voices International Conference 2024 in commemoration of the 16 days activism against gender-based violence for women, especially persons with disabilities in this space. We thank all the speakers. No, I'm not doing a lot of thanks. I'm just telling you that we're done. So The polls are on currently, hopefully. Don't wait for me to announce it. It should be on. Please fill the polls so that we know how you feel about different parts of the conference. And a big thank you to, so the questions, did the conference meet your expectations? Which part of the program interests you the most? Please pick all that you participated in, all right? Okay, it's only one. Great. So pick the most that struck you. So it's a single choice question, whether it's the brief conference webinars if you participated, or brave voice of the brave story you heard, or the special address, or the panel sessions, or the breakout sessions, or the break with any aspect of this conference that stood out to you. Just one. Go ahead. The third question. Please share what you learned about the intersection between disabilities and gender-based biases and discrimination. Keep it short. We know that this was touched in the different parts of the conversations. Then are you spurred to take action? Is this a yes? Is this a maybe? Is this a no? Please remember to pick your single choice. The fifth question is, what action would you like to take? So it's not enough to sit down and have the conversations, but because we're uniting, speaking true to the theme, you are a champion, you are a player in this. So we want to know what action would you like to take? Is it awareness? What is it? Is it finding an organization? Is it doing this in your organization? Is it partnering? Is it? So please let's know your actions. The other one is where your accommodation needs met. So this is especially with respect to accessibility and other forms where they met. So we would like to know, we have to like to know yes, not exactly a no. And to serve you better, because Brave Voices is here to stay, let us know how we can serve you better if your accommodation needs were not met. Remember, we're speaking about reasonable accommodation. All right, number 8 would be, would you participate in Brave Voices 2025? The responses are yes, likely, unlikely. So you want to do those. Those are the first 5 questions. They are 8 questions in all. Oh, there was no, sorry, there are 8 questions in all. So would like to appreciate if you can respond to all of them, because all are kind of required for you to be able to submit. So this is going to be open for a few more minutes. Just keep your responses short, and we'll be glad to have your responses. On behalf of myself and myself and myself, it's been a pleasure hosting this episode of the Brave Voices Conference 2024. The room is open, it's not going to be closed. For interactions, for pictures, and everything. So I would like you, wherever you are, to help us, should I say, let's see your beautiful face in your video so that a snapshot can be taken. At this stage, yes, snapshots have been taken throughout, so we can take a picture. So the room will be open for the next 10 minutes. Finish your polls, chats, also, have conversations as you were with anyone. But soon we'll be shutting down. So, but we need those polls responded to. So focus on that as much as you can. Thank you very much. God bless. So for those still here, would like you to follow. Okay, so Kacham Young Initiative, Brave Voices 2024, Empower Women and Girls with Disabilities and Bridging Inclusion Gaps in Advocacy Towards Preventing GBV. So you want to follow the sites so that you can stay updated with resources that will be made available, including all that we've done in the course of today. So follow Kachem Initiative on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Telegram at Kachem Young Initiative. Kachem is K for kites, A for apple, C for cat, H for happy, E for egg, and M for Maine. And then you follow on X, formerly Instagram, Kachem Young INI1. So you want to follow them on social media platforms, following it. And when you join, you'll be able to get updated on advocacies and information on Brave Voices 2025 and more. So final words, this is Freki Andy signing out, the ED of Faker Foundation and MWF and the host for this year. See you. Bye.